Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to the podcast that's storm where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone.
And I am your host last time, more wannabe, the brainstorm pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing well. Mostly.
Yeah, it's currently raining outside, which is providing really cool air for me with my fan in the window, so...
Yeah, it thunderstormed earlier here as well. It seems to have stopped now, though.
But yeah, so kind of not a lot really happened for the past week. Did get some things, but yeah. Okay, so we'll start with the first one. Dalton sent me this. This is from theobserver.com, revisiting Buffy Season 6, The Slayer versus Toxic Masculinity.
That is possibly the single stupidest title in the history of article kind, in general.
Right,
given the kind of stuff we usually cover, it's not too out of place, but good goddamn, that's still stupid.
Right. Okay, so full disclosure, I've never really seen Buffy too much, except for like a few episodes here and there. I mostly got into Angel, which was a sequel show. Not sequel show, but sister show.
Yeah.
Spinoff. And I was more a fan of that than Buffy. Nothing against the show itself. From what I remember watching of it, I thought it was good. It's very much Joss Whedon show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was neither good or bad. It was good. Like I get why it's regarded as a pretty good show. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Okay, I don't really have a leg to stand on because again, I'm not as connected to that show as I am with like Angel. So.
And I'm pretty much the exact opposite. I've seen a couple episodes of Angel. I never took to it. Love Buffy though. Funnily enough, the first episode I ever watched of Buffy, because I watched it in reruns, was an episode called Superstar, which is an episode that features Jonathan. So interesting.
Okay, so the subheader is, 20 years ago, a woman received the blame for ruining the show, but season 6 and its big bad trio of misogynists demands reconsideration in light of allegations. Creator Joss Whedon. I forgot to mention this by Rebecca Long. This was published May 11th, 2022.
Okay, first of all, Jonathan and Andrew, the two supporting members of the trio, are basically all but stooges, and both are painted as relatively sympathetic characters. Um, Jonathan is a kid after my own heart because he was a social outcast who started studying magic to, just so that he would have a thing. And Andrew very, very transparently had a thing for the leader of the trio, Warren. Warren is, if this can be applied to any character at all, the toxic one. But he wasn't toxic because toxic masculinity. He was toxic because he was a murderous psychopath who enjoyed murderous psychopathy for its own sake. The fact that that's being framed as toxic masculinity is fucking irritating, frankly. Because he didn't regard anyone as fully human. Not men, not women, not even probably himself, considering that basically when he's confronted on the bullshit he does, he basically said, well, I had to do it because I'm just this way. So in short, he doesn't consider himself fully human either. He basically considers Jonathan and Andrew as henchmen. Um, and fully intends to backstab them the first moment he gets. Um, and he only kills people who were his girlfriends previously because he can't sustain a relationship, and the people he was trying to sustain a relationship with happen to be women. But I think it's both uncharitable to a degree philosophically and overly charitable to his character to say that he was just toxically masculine, because no, dude was seriously just a really, 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 really fucked up brat. Moving on.
Yeah, alright. 25 years ago, Buffy the Vampire Slayer busted horror stereotypes wide open by subverting the dead girl trope. Titular heroine, a blonde cheerleader, wasn't a helpless love interest to be saved or mourned, but a formidable fighter with ambitions of her own, the Slayer.
That's not really subversive, and it wasn't trying to subvert horror tropes. It was trying to embrace horror and like supernatural horror and dark fantasy tropes, because Joss Whedon was a nerd and is a nerd, and so much the better because he created one of the most watchable shows in television history. And given that he was basing it loosely on a movie that he initially pitched and then was kicked out of, which was terrible, it's rather impressive that he took a relatively unknown B horror comedy and turned it into one of the most badass and long running franchises of the early 2000s and late 90s. Moving on.
Sorry, I took a bite of something. Then about 20 years ago, a woman received the blame from fans for ruining, air quotes, the show during its controversial sixth season. At the time, series creator and showrunner Joss Whedon was stretched thin working on his new show, Firefly, and writing Buffy's famous musical episode. Its only writing credit during the series' sixth season. As a result,
Okay. Stop. Because as any true blue Buffy fan knows, the place the show jumped the shark wasn't season 6, it was season 5, with the introduction of Dawn, who was Buffy's sister, who was created from a magical energy called the Key by some monks who warped all of reality around her. That's where any Buffy fans who claim the show did jump the shark claim that it jumped the shark. So if you're going to be blaming any female character or woman the um for the jumping the shark moment of Buffy, you should be blaming Dawn, not the writers, not the other characters, but Dawn is where most Buffy fans who have a problem with the later seasons say the show jumped the shark. I don't agree, frankly. I liked season 5. Season 5 was cool. and I love season 6 for reasons we'll probably get into. But yeah, no, if you're gonna be blaming a woman, quote unquote, for ruining the show, you need to be aiming your guns at season 5, not season 6, because the alternate reality sister created from nothing but mystical energy kind of is a bit of a jump the shark, what the fuck moment, even for Buffy. So there. And the fact that she stayed around after season 5, despite the fact that her whole plot had basically been used up, and one assumes that the key is somehow exhaustible, so she probably should have ceased existing shortly after Glory was defeated, but that's neither here nor there. Moving on.
As a result, executive producer Marty Noxon, became de facto showrunner, catching the flack for the season's darker tone and surprising plot lines.
Did anyone really hate season 6? I have I have been a Buffy fan for a very, very long time, and I've been in the Buffy fandom for a very, very long time as well. And most people agree season 6 is one of the best seasons of the show. Like, even the people who think season 5 fucked up usually say, but it got back on track when introducing Willow's magical addiction subplot thing. And of course, the aforementioned musical episode, which is, in my opinion, the best episode of the series. But then again, I just like musicals, especially magically facilitated musicals. So sue me. Moving on.
You really are a drama nerd.
You goddamn right.
Right. During the show's first 4 years, viewers basically knew what to expect. Buffy, so Michelle Gellar, fought supernatural villains, vampires, robots, and even a giant praying mantis. But the show was more than just slasher TV.
Yeah, all of that remains true basically until season 7. Season 7 went downhill quickly, but that was because the show was mostly out of ideas at that point. Buffy had fought literally everything from a god to a all-powerful witch to her own like past internalized demons, and like there was literally a episode in season 3 that was Buffy versus Dracula, wherein Dracula showed up. And frankly, I wish he had shown up more because he seemed to have known more about the Slayers' like internal mythology than most other characters on the show, and it would have been nice to have her like grovel to him at some point, for information. But maybe that's because I tend to like the villains. Again, sue me. Moving on.
One fact. Everything got choosing the bites precisely.
Mm.
But the show would, Buffy distinguished itself by using these otherworldly baddies as stand-ins for the trials and tribulations of adolescence, offering up smart commentary on relevant issues in unexpected ways.
Fuck your commentary. The show works on its own internal logic. Your themes and your symbolisms and your metaphors have no place here. Fuck off with them.
Okay, in a way, or like overall, I kind of agree. Not in like the kind of way they're like portraying it as, obviously. Again, I will always kind of go relate to when someone talked about like the difference between Buffy and Angel in terms of shows.
Mm-hmm.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a story about growing up, which was very evident with the characters. You know,
I mean, it was, and yes, there were some times where there was a cheesy metaphor to like growing up in there somewhere. But the thing is, and this is one of the reasons I really like Buffy, it did those kind of what used to be called very special episodes type episodes, the ones that did have very explicit morals or very explicit metaphors, to mock those kinds of episodes. Like when there was a transparent supernatural allegory type episode, like for example when werewolfism was obviously a metaphor for homosexuality, or when witchcraft, when magic was an allegory for drugs, they either steered hard into the serious angle and made it work within the show's mythos, metaphor be damned, or they would literally lampshade and mock how one-dimensionally obvious this metaphor was. That's one of the benefits of having your characters speak in what is nominally now referred to as Buffy speak, because the characters are capable of riffing the shit out of the stupidity of the things that are going on as and when they happen that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Moving on?
Yeah,
Okay.
moving on.
In season 6, however, the series abandoned metaphor, depicting very real struggles like addiction and gun violence, and swapping out demons for a trio of human misogynists. Warren Mears, Adam Bush, Jonathan Levinson, Danny Strong, and Andrew Wells, Tom Link. The season's bleaker storyline, abrupt twist, and devastating violence riled fans and critics alike.
Okay, major issue here. One, the trio is basically a set of bait and switch villains, okay? The trio is only there to fill time while we build up Willow's addiction to magic as a thing. Because the real villain of season 6, if anyone doesn't know, is Willow gone dark, because she has gotten so addicted to magic that she now basically has no moral compass left. And when she loses her girlfriend Tara to a errant shot from Warren's gun when he showed up to kill Buffy with a gun because reasons, it sends her off on a apocalyptically dark path where she wants to murder all three of the trio, and Buffy, Xander, and Anya and Giles have to prevent Willow from completing her dark transition, i.e., by going past the point of no return and killing them, and in so doing protect Andrew and Jonathan. Because again, the real bad guy amongst the trio is Warren, because Warren is a manipulative psychopathic bitch, or sociopathic bitch. But nevertheless, Warren and Jonathan and Andrew are mostly just along for the ride because they think the power and the money and the chicks and the, ruling the world. They're basically attracted to the same trappings of villainy that everyone gets attracted to: the money, the power, the taking over the world, etc. The cool the cool part of villainy. Warren, however, is actually interested in being villainous for villainy sake. Jonathan and Andrew want to be villains because it's cool, and it shows that it allows them to be powerful. And considering that both Jonathan and Andrew were basically loser outcasts for most of the show, although to be fair, I think Andrew was introduced with Warren. Jonathan has had set up for several seasons of the show because he's been a minor character in the entire show up until this point. But point being, both Jonathan and Andrew want the power and the prestige that comes along with being villains because they have had nothing handed to them in their lives. So they want to show, I'm worthy of attention, I'm worthy of power, I'm worthy of, taking over the world if that's what it takes to prove that I'm worth something. And so on. Warren is a murderous psychopath who is using the other two because they have useful skills that he needs, basically. But even so, the entire trio is basically a distraction. It's a bait and switch. It's a piece of narrative prestidigitation while we wait for Willow's darker tendencies to emerge because she's getting overly addicted to magic. And while there are some parallels to drug addiction, one of the things that I credit Joss Whedon for is he doesn't play the metaphor game. He makes the addictive qualities of magic work because he seems to understand, on a narrative level at least, how magic works. Like, he understands the internal, like, in-universe mechanics of how magic works, and occasionally throws in references to drug addiction as a way, if nothing else, to communicate it to the audience. Because, unlike me, most audience members don't have much experience with magic. But so he uses, if anything, it's a metaphor in reverse. He's using the more relatable struggle of drug addiction to explain to the normies who watch the show what magical addiction would be like. And quite frankly, if we must have metaphors, I would much rather it work that way around most of the time, rather than this in-universe thing is just an obvious metaphor for this out-of-universe thing. No, fuck that. Anyway, moving on.
Right. Viewers continue to debate how much Noxon's increased involvement contributed to the season's new direction. After Buffy, Noxon went on to create a television series of her own, including Unreal, Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, and Sharp Objects, all of which center women and explore misogyny and power. Given Noxon's post-Buffy credits, it's not hard to see her influence on the show's sixth season.
Okay, see, I don't care, because season 6 was not considered bad by the fan base. It was considered one of the best seasons of the show because of the Dark Willow saga. So you're acting as though there's some grassroots opposition to season 6 that simply isn't there. Because most people, when they think of season 6, don't even think of the trio. They think of Willow and how much of a dark badass she is, because she basically literally goes Dark Phoenix. And the characters actually reference this at some point. I think it's Andrew who mentions in episode 1 of the Dark Willow trilogy that Willow is basically going Dark Phoenix, which is slightly bad form on Joss Whedon's part for referencing the thing that you're obviously taking inspiration from, but it's still fucking funny because, of course, most of the characters on Buffy are nerds themselves, so it makes sense that they would know or would make references to comic book storylines. If you're a nerdy writer and you need your nerd characters to say nerdy things, it's better to write, nerdier characters so that it makes sense that they would say the things that you're wanting them to say. Rather than, for example, shoving your words into characters' mouths for no goddamn reason, like most modern day writers do. Ahem, Marvel. Ahem.
Or CW.
Yeah, everything. But anyway, moving on.
Right. Buffy's penultimate season is still as polarizing as ever, yet in light of recent allegations against Whedon's abuse of power on multiple sets, including Buffy's, season 6 was perhaps more revealing and ironic than viewers realized.
No, and again, I'm confused by your assumption that season 6 was polarizing. Season 5 was polarizing, I will give you that. Season 5 was definitely polarizing, but you're not talking about season 5. You're not talking about the fact that some monks literally conjured up a sister for Buffy 4 seasons into a show that didn't exist previously. You're not talking about any of that. You're talking about a season that is almost universally loved because of the Dark Willow saga, and you're trying to create a scenario whereby it is controversial. It simply wasn't so. If a female writer is mostly responsible for season 6, then so much the better because she did a good job. I don't think I would agree with her politics otherwise because of what you've described here. But who knows? You might be unnecessarily cramming feminist talking points into her mouth because you seem to be wanting to cram feminist talking points everywhere where they don't belong. So I don't know. But if a female writer was more responsible for season 6 um than Joss Whedon himself was, so much the better because frankly season 6 might be my favorite season of the show. Moving on.
Right. Sorry. Aside from Buffy's toxic relationship with her enemy turned lover, Spike, played by James Marsters, or Marsters. Is it Marstons or Marsters?
Marsters.
God, I've been saying it wrong all this time, and no one said shit.
I think I might have said shit, but I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, it's
Yeah.
James Marsters, who honestly at this point is more synonymous to me of Harry Dresden than it is Spike because James Marsters is the reader for all of the Dresden Files audiobooks, and he is, in my head, the voice of Harry Dresden.
Journalists and fans levied the majority of the criticism at one element of season 6. Buffy's main nemesis, the aforementioned trio, as indicated by the critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, which labels season 6 a series low. Audiences struggle to take the Dungeons & Dragons playing nerds could decide on a whim to take over Sunnydale seriously as villains.
That's the joke, you idiots! The joke is that the trio is ineffective because they are all like varying degrees of useless.
Wrong.
Yeah.
You do realize that critics never get the joke, right?
Yes, I know, but it's still annoying that they didn't get the joke because yes, writers, or critics, that is the joke. The joke is that the trio is an ineffective set of nemesis for Buffy at this point. Why are they mostly ineffective for Buffy at this point? Because they're meant to act as a distraction for the mounting magical addiction and thereby spiritual darkening of one Willow Rosenberg, thereby setting up the Dark Willow saga. And it is in fact the childish, dick-headed, myopic incompetence of Warren Mears that leads to the emergence of Dark Willow because he thinks, well, why has nobody else ever thought to just shoot the Slayer with a gun? I'm going to try that. And it doesn't work because Buffy survives the bullet, but that's neither here nor there. And one of his errant shots flies through a window, kills Tara, Willow's girlfriend, the only thing tethering her back to humanity at this point, right as they were about to rekindle their relationship, by the way. And then Willow tries in vain to call up Osiris, the Egyptian Lord of the Dead, to resurrect Tara in the same way that she resurrected Buffy after season 5. And because Tara's death was a natural death, i.e. a human death by human means, Osiris doesn't want to meddle with it because it would mean meddling with the fabric of nature. And he tells her no, and Willow throws a dark magical shit fit at the Lord of the Underworld, as you do. Like, yeah, it's very obvious that the trio is meant to be ineffective and meant to be myopic and meant to be stupid because they're meant to be a distraction. It's a bait and switch. You think the villains are going to somehow be the trio, but in actuality, the villain is Willow, one of their own, darkening up because she gets so addicted to magic and power that she can't see the forest for the trees anymore. And when something hurts her, when something wounds her, she goes off full cocked into, I'm just going to destroy the world to end everyone's suffering. That's the impetus for Dark Willow. Not to mention that Warren's death scene is probably the best death scene in the entire show, but that's neither here nor there. Moving on.
I saw that scene.
Yeah, it's seriously badass shit. Like, as badass as Wanda was in Multiverse of Madness, she never got anywhere near Dark Willow levels of fucked up.
Well, it's a Disney movie, so
Well, yeah, but I mean,
we'll
the
get into it.
yeah, moving on. Yeah.
In a 2017 Vulture ranking of all 7 seasons of Buffy, Sarah D. Bunting deemed the trio less credible as big bads than they are tiresome. It's ranked season 6 second to last.
That's the joke, you idiots! And yes, they are, but that's because the real villain all along. You know what? Fuck it. I will translate this into modern pop culture so that everyone can get this. It was Willow all along. There. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. In 2020, Samantha Highfill wrote for Entertainment Weekly, the trio. That's fun for an episode or two, but they simply don't carry the weight of a real big bad.
Because they're not supposed to. You're literally supposed to be wondering when the real threat shows up, because as it happens, Willow has been dipping into dark magic for at least 2 seasons at this point, and we're about to reap the consequences of her being able to go Super Saiyan Dark Witch when the plot requires it of her, and as yet, this hasn't really been addressed much. Like in I think it's the middle of season 5. The Dark God bound in human form because reasons, Glory or Glorificus, um, steals the mind of Terra because she feeds on the energies that bind minds together, um, and basically turns Terra into a mental case for an entire season. Upon realizing this, Willow powers up with dark magic and takes a fucking pound of god flesh out of Glory's ass for it. Um, and as you can imagine, this requires her going very, very freaking dark. But also, as you can imagine, it's useful for the plot, so we can't really dwell on it at this moment. But because Willow did that, and because Willow has done several other circumstantially useful power ups throughout the latter 3 seasons of the show, she's slowly getting addicted to more and more powerful magic. And the power is blinding her to consequences. Because she thinks, well, I'll just use a spell to fix it. It's no big deal. I'll just use a spell to fix it, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually, this leads to her getting addicted to magic, seeking out a magical drug dealer by the name of Rack, who honestly would have been a good choice for the casting of Randall Flagg in the most recent Stand adaptation, but that's neither here nor there. And literally getting high off of magical power. And this is happening all throughout season 6, so that when Terra dies by Warren's hand, albeit by accident, she goes on the warpath and thinks, I'm gonna kill me some trio members. Unfortunately, because Warren is the only really bad one, after she kills him, she still wants to kill the other 2, and Buffy, Xander, Anya, and Giles have to be like, hold up now, they were pawns in his games just like you were. You can't kill them. But of course, Willow is, by this point, so hopped up on dark magic that she doesn't care, and nothing can stop her anyway, so she just walks through shit. Like you do. That is the impetus for this whole thing. The trio is meant to be useless and stupid because their useless stupidity is what is going to be the final nail in the coffin for Willow's connection to, like, her humanity. And then Willow was the true villain all along, essentially. Moving on.
Right. Okay. The three even landed on Screen Rant's 2017 list of Buffy's most ridiculous foes. Okay.
They were meant to be, you idiots.
All right. However, 2 decades on, many critics and fans' view of the trio has shifted. Once thought silly, or at least too on the nose for a show that thrived using allegory to explore the human condition, sexist threesome now appear more terrifying for being ordinary men.
Again, fuck your allegory. Stop instrumentalizing art when its value can be perfectly found within its own confines, i.e., the value of the art is contained within the art, not external to it. You fucking morons. Moving on.
Right. Excuse me. Uh, Twitter user at Buffy Forums recently thanked the actors who portrayed the trio, noting that the villains grow more relevant with each year. In 2017, Vanity Fair contributor Joanna Robinson dubbed this season a frightening look into the entitled misogynistic rhetoric that rose to the surface during the Gamergate culture wars of 2014. And has seen.
Unbe-fucking-believable.
Hold on, Don. Hold on. Let me finish the sentence. And has seemingly infiltrated everything since the 2016 presidential election included.
You guys, I can't. Oh my fucking god. I read through the first couple paragraphs and I knew we had to cover this, but god damn it. What the hell, guys? One, Warren is the only truly irredeemable person within the trio. And in case you forgot, guys, both Jonathan and Andrew, who is gay, by the way, are portrayed as very, very, very sympathetic. And frankly, it's Jonathan's joining of the trio that makes them relevant to us in the first place because Jonathan has already been an established minor character for at least a couple seasons by this point. Remember Superstar? That episode that I literally started the series with because I watched it out of order in reruns? Like him trying to use magical power to basically compensate for the hollowness in his life has been an established thing since I think that was season 3. Because yeah, Riley was there, so season 3. But nevertheless, like Jonathan is portrayed as sympathetic in literally every appearance that he's in. Misguided, but sympathetic. Andrew is portrayed as sympathetic in basically every time he appears. The only one that is truly, honest to goodnessly irredeemable is Warren, and he doesn't give a fuck about men, women, or anything else. He is a one-dimensional sociopath, probably because he was traumatized as a child, but we never really get that context. So I'm just gonna headcanon that because that makes sense psychologically and move on. Moving on.
Okay. Throughout the season. Sorry. Okay. Throughout the season, Jonathan, Andrew, and particularly leader Warren harass Buffy, the Scooby Gang, and most women they interact with.
Again, where the fuck are you? They harass everyone. You honestly think they give a shit about men in any meaningful way, guys? Seriously? Like Warren doesn't even. Okay, this is how deep this goes. Warren doesn't even care about Jonathan and Andrew. He cares about what they can do for him, what skills they have, and that they can provide for him. Like for example, Warren is good with robots. Andrew is good with both money and because he's rich, and computers, and Jonathan is good with magic. Like that is the be all and end all of their usefulness to Warren as far as he's. It's made very clear several times that given the ability to, he will betray them both at the drop of a hat. He has a minor soft spot for Andrew because Andrew is a fucking soft-hearted simp for Warren the entire time. And so he values Andrew slightly more than he values Jonathan because Andrew is useful as a yes man toady, basically. But Warren doesn't care about anyone, least of all himself, because it's made very clear several times that he is tortured by the bad shit he has done, and also tortured by the fact that he feels that he never had the chance to avoid them. Because Warren is a short-sighted idiot, and his short-sighted idiocy comes back to bite him in the ass in quite spectacular fashion when Willow goes dark.
Wait, is season 6 the one where there's an episode in there that Buffy gets turned invisible?
Was it season 6? It might have been season 5. Because Willow casts a spell that everything she wants will come true, and she says something to the effect of, "You're nothing, nobody can see you," and then it literally just turns her invisible. Because she gets angry with Buffy one time, she misspeaks, and then the magic amplifies it out to turn her invisible.
No, I think it was like an invisibility ray that the trio used. Because they were in there in that episode.
Okay, yeah, did they use that gimmick a second time? Because I could have sworn that was something from the time that Willow had the "anything I want happens" spell going.
I don't know.
Either way, it was somewhere in there.
I just remember the scene with Buffy and Spike while she was invisible. It was funny because Xander walked in on them and Buffy and Spike were doing the do, and Xander didn't know because Buffy was invisible, and thus Spike was trying to pretend that he was doing exercises naked, like push-ups and stuff.
By the way, not to do doctoring on Spike's character too much here, but the whole reason why his behavior is quote unquote toxic, quote unquote, is because he literally has no soul for most of the series. So despite the fact that he genuinely cares for Buffy, he lacks the element of humanity that a soul would provide, and so he ends up going too far. Because he's still wired to be a predator, because vampire. And even that is portrayed fairly sympathetically. So don't be giving me this thing of, "Oh, it was meant to be toxic masculinity all along," or some shit. No. All characters, with the exception of Warren, and even he gets a tragic backstory here and there, who display toxic masculinity, in air quotes, are portrayed very sympathetically. But you don't seem to be... Ironically, I would go so far as to say that if I was operating from a feminist framework, if I was to be persuaded to operate from such a thing, I would have a problem with Buffy season 6 on the grounds that it portrays toxic masculinity as too sympathetic. But, far be it from me, a anti-feminist, egalitarian, and men's rights advocate, to tell you how to be feminist correctly or anything. But yeah, as it happens, you're completely glossing over the fact that most of these characters are at least portrayed as tragic, if not sympathetic, while they're doing these things. And all but Warren end up getting out of it basically unscathed from like a moral and narrative perspective. And the only reason why he doesn't is because he unrepentantly murders a couple people. When he had the explicit option not to. And he gets fucking skinned alive for it. So
Literally.
Yeah. Because Dark Willow gets bored, you see, and goddamn that bored now scene. I love Willow so much. I love all versions of Willow, but Dark Willow was badass.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
All right. But as the season progresses, the violence grows from hurling disgusting gender-based insult. You really are asking for it, you know that. To attempted R-word and successful murder. Fueled by women-hating rage, the trio exposed that any ordinary man, geeks and nerds included, can become a monster.
They hate everyone because everyone treats them like shit. At least with regards to Jonathan and Andrew.
Yeah, wasn't there
Um,
Jonathan? I think it's Jonathan. I think Andrew's the blonde one. Jonathan's the black
yeah,
guy, right?
yeah. Jonathan is the short, nerdy, magical one, and yes, the obligatory obvious joke is the obligatory obvious joke. Um,
But I think Jonathan. There was an episode where Buffy could read minds, and she stopped him from basically sniping people because it was a whole thing. I don't remember what episode it was.
yeah, it was an episode about like basically school shooting. It was in season 2, I think. Yeah, it was season 2 because then Jonathan comes back again in season 4, or is it 3 or is it 4? But whatever in Superstar where he uses a spell to rewrite reality and make himself badass. Um, and it basically is revealed that after he tried to do a mass shooting and then kill himself, they sent him to a mental institution, and he met someone in there who knew magic and learned a spell that could rewrite reality to whatever he wanted.
Um, yeah. Moving on, or
Yeah.
okay. Watching Buffy's sixth season in 2022, the creative decision to center three prototypical incels as the heroine's main antagonist seems less like a mistake and more like an insightful choice.
You realize you guys use that word incel for exactly what the old school like bullies use the word nerd for, right? All you've done is change the terminology. You haven't even changed who you're targeting the terminology yet. You just changed the word. Like,
Um, sorry, sorry. I
go
thought
ahead.
no.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, I thought. No, I don't really. No, I don't have anything. I thought I did, but I don't.
Okay. But yeah, all you guys have done is off-road the negative implications of the term nerd because you can't get away with that shit anymore onto my toxic fandom, quote unquote, or incel. You haven't changed who you target that term at. You haven't changed why you target it at them. You've just changed the word. And yet somehow in your head it's perfectly okay to ad hominem someone out of existence by way of incel, just like in the old days the stereotypical jock bullies did with the term nerd. You guys seriously think that you're in the moral right here? You guys seriously think that you're on the, to use the common social justice term, on the right side of history with this? You think history is going to look back favorably on this and not going to look back on it like, remember when people demeaned and belittled people by calling them incels? Like, you seriously don't see where history is going with regards to this. Sorry. It's a tangent, but it's a tangent I've been wanting to make for a while because it bothers me that they think that they can do the exact same shit to the exact same people and just do it with a different word and think they can either get away with it in general or be in the moral right particularly. What the fuck?
Okay. Moving on, or yeah, anything
Yeah,
else?
go on.
Okay. But given Whedon's reputation as a fallen feminist, in air quotes, is also an ironic one.
Okay. Go back a second because I completely forgot to mention something. You're calling the trio a bunch of incels, and you completely gloss over the fact that Andrew is very obviously gay. And
I have a question. Because it was technically early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, right? Of the show.
Mhm.
Did he have a piercing in his, is it left or right ear?
I would have to actually physically go back because I've never looked at his ear.
Well, no, you get the joke, right? Like
Yeah, no, I get the joke. It's an obvious, yeah, it's an obvious code word for by the way I'm gay, but or an obvious symbol for by the way I'm gay.
But for
But yeah,
the record, I can make that joke. Well, I can.
yes, he has the shield of my gay card for the purposes of making this joke.
I'm sorry. I did have to ask because like he had the spiky blonde hair. The stereotypical kind of image of like
Yeah.
late 90s, early
Yeah,
2000s.
and the lispy, effeminate voice, and all of the very, very, very feminine mannerisms, and so on and so. Although to be fair, as like late '90s, early 2000s gay stereotypes go, Warren is, or sorry, Andrew is portrayed very, very sympathetically for a gay character. Although that doesn't surprise me, considering that Buffy has been sneaking gay subtext in there since like I think season 2 was the werewolf episode where werewolfism was very obviously a metaphor for homosexuality. Um, as much as I hate fucking metaphors, and they actually make fun of that attitude as well because one of the school bullies comes out as gay to Xander because he thinks he's talking about homosexuality when he's actually talking about werewolfism, and it's hilarious. Um, but point being, and also obviously, uh, Willow and Sarah were bi and in a relationship with each other the entire time, and of course, it's her death that triggers off Dark Willow's dark streak. So yeah,
Um, moving on.
yep.
Okay. Watching Buffy's 60. Sorry, I read that. In Sex and the Slayer 2005, Buffy scholar Dr. Loma Jowett notes that Warren uses his power to dominate, views his brains as his most masculine quality, belittles others to bolster himself, and feels deeply anxious about his sexuality. Okay, so the first two things, I would argue that is typical. Like, uh, is it superiority or inferiority complex?
Inferiority in this case, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's typical inferiority complex for villains, which is actually a very common thing for various villains.
Especially nerdy, physically weaker ones, which the trio are.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't. Again, it's been so long, and I don't think I've really watched any episodes in season 6. Or if I have, it's been a very long time, so I don't know about the anxious about his sexuality thing.
Yeah, Andrew is coping for most of the
No,
first half
Warren,
of the season with the fact that
Warren, not Andrew, Warren.
mm, no, he very obviously prefers women.
Yeah,
He's
didn't he have
not.
a robot girlfriend? I'm just
Yes,
remembering little tidbits from the show.
yes, he did. Um, based on someone that he accidentally killed when they were in bed together.
I'm not even going to ask. I don't want to know.
I'm telling you, Warren is a very, very, very fucked up character. A very realistic, very, very, very fucked up character, but a fucked up character nonetheless. Jesus Christ. But as far as Andrew, yeah, he's coping with the fact that he very obviously has a crush on Warren the entire season, and only after Warren abandons them and sticks Jonathan and Andrew in jail does Andrew come to terms with the fact that he has a massive guy crush on Warren, even though it's very obvious to the audience the entire time.
Moving on.
Yep.
Okay. Looking back, did Noxon really ruin, quote unquote, Buffy by steering the show in a different direction during season 6, or did she intentionally not allude to what was happening behind the scenes? Again, I don't think the showrunner really ruined.
Yeah. Okay. This is the problem. You're conflating two things that don't necessarily follow from each other in that section. It's something in philosophy referred to as a syllogism, which is when you take two or more true things and you connect them with false assumptions. Um, well, that's one of the forms of a syllogism. But yes, no, if this writer had more sway over season 6 than Joss did, she didn't ruin anything because season 6 is awesome. But also, no, she probably didn't force toxic masculinity derp reasons into um the story, because toxic masculinity as a concept, um or as a piece of feminist like terminology, wasn't even a thing really, at least not widespread in the early 2000s. Like the early 2000s was like the very end of the second, like late 90s, early 2000s was the very end of like the second wave, beginning of the third wave. And like I don't remember when what the fuck was her name wrote The Invisible Knapsack and coined the term intersectionality, but this was certainly before that, or at least before that concept had gone mainstream. So I very much doubt that you can view uh Buffy season 6 in a third, at the very least, a third wave intersectional social justice mindset. You can, I suppose, if you want to apply a second wave feminist mindset to it, but even then, one of the things that make Buffy better than your average show is they don't hyper focus on metaphors and symbolism and derp it. They make the mechanics of the show work within the context of the show, and that if there's other subtext behind them, it's it's basically supplementary, as well it should be when these sorts of themes are employed. Make them as organic as possible, and as much as possible focus on the internal nature of the world and the show and the narrative, and any extraneous symbolism and metaphors can be supplementary to that or complementary to that, but not primary by any stretch of the imagination. Moving on.
Okay. While Whedon has admittedly always seen himself in Buffy's best friend Xander Harris, played by Nicholas Brendan, a sexually frustrated nice guy. Joette's descriptions.
Oh, you do not get to nice guy syndrome, Xander Harris. Thank you very fucking much. He he is the Shaggy of the Scooby Gang in this context. You do not get to slander the good name of Xander Harris. Thank you and fuck off. Moving on.
Joette's descriptions of Warren are also eerily similar to Accusers' descriptions of the showrunner. In 2017, in a guest post for the Wrap, Whedon's ex-wife, Kai Cole, called him a hypocrite preaching feminist ideals and accusing him of having multiple affairs. She alleges he once said to her, when I was running Buffy, I was surrounded by beautiful, needy, aggressive young women. Suddenly I'm a powerful producer and the world is laid out at my feet.
Okay, this does not mean that feminism is the one true morality or anything. In fact, this is exactly what you would expect to see among moralizing pricks, because those who are moralizing and puritanical and strict with their morality tend to be the exact people who need absolution from that very same morality. As we know, it's going to be the firebrand anti-gay preacher that winds up being caught stooping the altar boy with a stack full of Playgirl magazines in his locker or something. As we know, it's always going to be the um the priest who vilifies sexuality that winds up getting caught in the whorehouse. As we know, like, male feminists tend to be the exact pictures of toxic masculinity that they preach against, because in all of these cases, people with strict moralities use that strict morality to either absolve themselves of it, i.e., if I just force this morality down people's throats hard enough, then I'll be redeemed, then I'll have atoned for my sins. Or, more likely, there's a notion of, in traditional Christianity, it's original sin, but in the case of the male feminist, it's toxic masculinity, i.e., it's not my fault that I'm this way. Everyone is secretly this way. Everyone is secretly broken and damaged and useless and evil. And only through this one morality can anyone ever possibly have absolution. So that means that anyone who can be a good, who says they can be a good person without Christianity must be lying. Or anyone who says they can be a non-toxic male without feminism in their lives must be lying, because everyone is secretly this way. Yet no, I don't believe in original sin. I don't believe in toxic masculinity in regards to the like, it affects all men sense. I mean, you can maybe make the argument for it as a psychological mechanism, but only insofar as you also allow that certain women's adherence to a hyper strict definition of femininity could result in toxic femininity. Like, if we don't get to, if you guys want to talk about the Blutos and the Gastons and the fucking Joss Whedons, that's fine, but only insofar as we also get to talk about the Elizabeth Bathory's, the Evil Queens, and of course the Amber Heards. That is what we call a universally applicable principle. If men can be toxically masculine, then it's possible for women to be toxically feminine, and not in the victimized sense, but in the sense that it causes them to victimize other people sense, just like toxic masculinity. Or we can put away both of these concepts and say that neither of them exist, which I would also be fine with. Because while I think these terms might be useful in certain contexts, because oftentimes people are motivated by needing to adhere to their ideal of something to do negative behavior, but its usefulness as a concept, if it is applicable at all, is very, very limited, and you're not using it in a very limited sense. You're using it in the same sense that Christians used the term original sin back in the day. Moving on.
Okay. In Vulture's infamous 2022 interview with Whedon, in which he and journalist Lila Shapiro discussed his affairs and other accusations made against him, he said he had felt he had to sleep with young women on Buffy's set, and he was powerless to resist.
See, this is what happens when you have an ideology that basically revolves around people automatically being assumed to be flawed or corrupt. If you automatically assume original sin exists, then when people feel the compulsion to sin, they're going to mentally justify it to themselves by, I have to. I was made this way. I was broken from the moment I was born or some shit. And if you focus a ideology around the idea of toxic masculinity, what you'll get is a bunch of men going, my toxic behavior isn't my toxic behavior. It's just a fact that I'm a man and all men secretly have these desires, don't you know? I have to do this because I'm powerless to resist it. Yeah, in my opinion, we should 86 both of these nihilistic, cynical approaches to human nature, because I don't think humans are naturally born broken, either by nature or by social engineering or social interactions or whatever the fuck. I think humans are both good and bad and everywhere in between, because humans, right, have always been human for as long as we can remember, and we don't need strict moralities to make ourselves good people. We just need common sense, empathy, and the innate nature of what it is to be a human being, because evolutionary psychology has already sorted a lot of this shit out for us already. You don't need a priest to make you a good person. You don't need a professor to make you a good person. You don't need Christianity to make you a good person, and you don't need feminism to make you a good person. You just have to do what makes sense, and everything else be damned. And it's funny that the only people who seem to be immune to these types of moral corruption, whether it be original sin or toxic masculinity, are the people who don't need strict, strictly enforced morality to be good people. The people who just don't give a fuck tend to be decent people just in general, because it never occurred to them to do bad things. They just did what made sense, and most of the bad shit never made sense to them. It's fucking hilarious how that works.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Plith sucrose. I can break myself. Thank you very much, the authenticator.
Well, I mean, yes, there is that. I am perfectly capable of saving or breaking my own will as and when I need to. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, Cyclops. Just yeah. Okay. Yes, I do. Spike you, man. Just spike you. Lol. Cyclops and Dragon Turtle. It isn't that humans are broken. They are working just as intended-ish. Not perfect either. Problem is, a successful life form is an asshole, either by themselves or working well with others.
See, I don't think.
Oh god.
See, I think that's where you usually go wrong, Dragon Turtle. I don't think that a successful life form necessarily must be an asshole. If that were the case, we never would have developed into a social species to begin with, because there would have been no benefit to being socially lucrative. But there is, and apparently the benefit of being socially lucrative is quite a disproportionate one, considering despite the fact that we have no great degree of strength compared to other animals, despite the fact that we have no great degree of hunting instincts compared to other animals, and despite the fact that we have no great degree of means to defend ourselves compared to other animals, being intelligent and socially lucrative primates seemed to be a winning strategy, considering there's 7 to 8 buggering billion of us on this planet in complex civilizations, and meanwhile our closest relatives are sitting in the jungle somewhere still trying to figure out how sticks and leaves work.
Cliff, I've never heard of asshole beavers. Okay.
I mean, I don't know enough about beavers to say one way or the other.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
In 2020, Ray Fisher claimed. Excuse me. Ray Fisher claimed Whedon had been abusive on set of Justice League, which fellow actor Gal Gadot soon confirmed. Then in early 2022, Charisma Carpenter, who played Cordelia Chase on both Buffy and Angel, took to Twitter to stand with Fisher and share her own experiences outlining the ways in which Whedon abused his power on both sets and personally targeted her.
And again, I just want to point out the irony of it always seems to be the strict adherents to a given moral system who end up getting caught defying that exact same moral system. It's always the firebrand preacher who's against homosexuality that ends up getting caught stooping the altar boy. It's always the reefer madness panicking, housewife that ends up getting caught with a bag full of weed, and so on and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, the people who you have to worry about are the very same people who, to the public, show a very moral faith. The people who you ironically indeed don't usually have to worry about are the people who just nonchalantly don't give a fuck. Because, and I do have a theory about this. My theory about this is that because people who have cluster B personality disorders like narcissism, sociopathy, psychopathy, etc., don't have an innate sense of intuitive empathy. They need strict moralities to compensate for their lack of an innate form of empathy. Because while the part of their brain that foments empathy might be not working because of damage usually, the rest of their brain is a human brain. So it's like having a giant hole in a system. And they seek to fill that system by either inventing complex, strict moral structures, which is why every single serial killer always gets caught with a giant ass moral manifesto, or by hyper focusing on whatever hyper strict moral structure is to hand, like fundamentalism of various different religions or fundamentalism of various different socio-political ideologies, which is why you find an inordinate amount of people with cluster B personality disorders in extremely radical political and social movements, because given that they don't have an intuitive sense of empathy like every other human in the goddamn world, they fill that hole with extremely strict axioms that they must adhere to. And they don't understand how people with intuitive senses of empathy can just nonchalantly not give a fuck about morality because they already have the moral software intuitively in their brains because their mirror neurons work effectively. So ironically, indeed, it's usually the people who substitute laissez-faire intuitive empathy with strict morality that you have to look out for. Because the people who claim you can't have a morality without God, or you can't have a morality without feminism, are the people who find that in themselves they wouldn't be moral without those hyper strict moral structures. However, the rest of us, the rest of humanity, have this intuitive sense of empathy thanks to mirror neurons, and usually can, with a minor degree of critical thinking and common sense, figure that shit out for ourselves, and therefore we don't have to spend a bunch of time figuring it out. Now, granted, I personally am probably not a good example of intuitive morality because I am very obsessive about philosophy and so on and so forth. But as I've often said, I am fully aware of the fact that I'm not a good person. And what's more, I don't really even have a desire to be. So there. I'm a perfect test case for exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have intuitive sense of empathy, so I substitute it for logic where it needs to be. I just happen to be a little better at it than most people because I have to think about it more than most people. Just like a person with autism tends to get very good at reading people because they don't have the neurological software to read people like most people can. So they have to do it cognitively by learning how to. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Multiple Buffyverse crew members and actors corroborated Carpenter's account or voiced their support, including Eliza Dushku, Dushku, who portrayed Slayer Faith, Marsters, Geller, and Noxon, when previously asked about Cole's claims in a 2018 Vulture interview. She said she had never experienced weed in that way. The list of allegations goes on. These claims against Whedon are all the more painful because of his self-described feminist beliefs and history of championing strong female characters who've subverted stereotypes. Of course, looking back, it's clear that while Buffy was groundbreaking in so many ways, it also peddled more insidiously toxic ideas about women.
Again, I'm of two minds on this because I'm always going to side with burden of proof is on the accuser, not the accused, and innocent until proven guilty and all that. However, given the sheer number of male feminists that we have caught doing the what they would call toxically masculine behavior, I find it unsurprising if it turns out that Joss Whedon did those things. But you cannot take the male feminists who get caught doing toxically masculine air quotes things and universalize it to all men any more than the firebrand preacher who nevertheless feels the need to sin in every way from Sunday can universalize his personal shame and guilt onto literally all humans and say, those atheists over there who have figured out how to be moral using Immanuel Kant and fucking John Locke couldn't possibly be moral without God, so they must be lying. Yet no. Some people don't need strict morality to be decent people. Some people can just do it intuitively or with the 5 seconds it takes to learn about critical thinking and basic philosophy and pair that together with their instincts, and then we're off to the races and they don't need to think about it ever again.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Okay. The statements about Whedon's on-set behavior also call into question the creation of villains like the trio. Is it a form of cover or confession that Buffy's creator recognized the threat of toxic masculinity in season 6's Big Bad while allegedly abusing his power?
No. What was portrayed in the case of Warren Mears was not a toxically masculine person. What was portrayed in the case of Warren Mears was a sociopath. And he doesn't give a fuck about men either, considering the two men that he worked with, he was ready, willing, and able to betray at the drop of a hat. And only felt guilty when he was faced with his own crimes against both men and women. So it's not a toxically masculine thing, and even if it were meant to be a toxically masculine thing, the term toxic masculinity didn't come into common parlance, even among writers, until the mid to late 2000s, when the third wave of feminism had migrated from academia to culture in general, by way of academia. So even if you want to project the narrative about toxic masculinity onto season 6 of Buffy, it doesn't apply for any number of reasons within the show, but even if you wanted to, that person had not at that point heard of toxic masculinity, and there's no way you can demonstrate that she did because that term wasn't in common parlance at the time. So even if you want to project that, the person you're claiming wrote it in there didn't write it in there because she couldn't have wrote it in there because the term didn't exist in the common parlance yet. So wrong, many, many, many ways from Sunday, darling.
Moving on.
Yep.
God damn. I'm tired. Judging by her Twitter bio, Alexson does accept at least some of the blame, or rather the credit, for season 6's dark direction and the trio's presence. Given that most of her work also centers on women and she has spoken out about other abusive showrunners in the past, her impact on the season seems clear. But Whedon's influence was never wholly absent. In the 2018 Vulture interview, Alex confirmed she had way more input over that season than others, but qualified that anybody who knows Joss knows that his idea of taking a backseat is not every single thing.
Yeah, so even if you want to lay all this feminist gobbledygook at the feet of this one female writer, Joss Whedon is still Joss Whedon. So, again, my suggestion to you is stop with all of this art has to exist as a means to an end crap. Stop with the metaphors and the symbolism and the derp, and just focus on the internal logic of the show and the internal logic of the characters and the story that's actually being presented to you. Don't worry about the people who made the thing. Don't worry about the symbolism and the themes. Just focus on the characters that exist within the world and the world they exist in, and whether or not that is a compelling and valuable story of and for its own sake. If all artistic people could just get that simple thing through their heads, that art isn't supposed to exist as a means to an end, but as an end in itself, we would be in a much better place artistically right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving on.
All right. Whedon has also insisted he was still intimately involved in season 6 despite his other commitments, remarking in a 2005 interview with a movie blog, "I love season 6. It's really important instead of bigger than like villain. We have the nerd Trioka. Trioka. What? I don't fucking know. Say trio.
White show, maybe? I can't see it, but maybe that's the word.
It's Troika.
Yeah, I don't know.
I assume
it's
another word for trio.
Yeah, I think that's just Josh being Josh and making up words on his own merits, because Josh has a very particular way of speaking, and I'm not gonna try and unravel it. Anyway, move on.
Hold on, I just want to look it up just so like I know what the word is.
Yeah.
Okay. Group of 3 people working together, especially in an administrative or managerial style capacity. That's weird to use for a couple villains.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So drinking blood and doing spells as sexual metaphor. We had sex. Things became very literal, and they lost some of their loveliness. What the fuck?
Yeah, no, fuck you then, because things working literally in the logic of the universe makes it better, not worse. Fuck off. Metaphors are meant to be at best supplementary or complementary. They're not supposed to be primary. The internal logic of the universe you're working within is supposed to be primary, and any metaphors and symbolism you can draw from it is supposed to be secondary. The fact that the art school hipsters have managed to invert that to where the metaphors and the symbolism are primary and the internal logic therefore takes a backseat to the metaphor is exactly the problem with modern day art. Art is to exist as an end in and of itself, not some kind of quasi-utilitarian means to an end for my metaphors and my symbolism and my secondary meanings. Fuck your secondary meanings, focus on the primary meanings first, which are the literal ones. I.e., does this make sense mechanically in the universe you're operating within? If not, then you either need to ditch the metaphor or find a way to work the metaphor into the actual mechanics somehow.
Right. Moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
Right. Over 20 years since the debut of Buffy's 6th season, the trio arc appears more relevant than ever, with viewers reassessing the once hated storyline and doubting at one of the series' best. However, understanding how the trio came to be and reconciling the season's theme with allegations against Whedon is a messy enterprise. This cognitive dissonance indicates that artistic expression is not necessarily the same thing as self-reflection, and catering to feminist audiences does not necessarily make a showrunner a feminist. However, while you can't always separate the artist from the art can still be good.
I mean, yes, but the error in the spanner in your works, love, is that the artist was never what made the art good. The the fact that an artist can create good art is what's supposed to validate the artist, The artist does not validate the art. I'm the more I deal with modern day quote unquote aesthetic intellectuals, the more I want to go back to the ancient Greek approach of the artist's job is to serve the art because the art obviously comes from a higher plane of existence. Whether you want to call that intuition or whether you want to call that the influence of some kind of entity like the muses or some shit, I don't really care. Or whether you want to say it's an emergent factor of human psychology, I don't really care. But obviously, the people who make art don't control the art they make, or at the very least, they should try not to. Their job is kind of like Lewis and Clark. Their job is to go into their own minds and look at the worlds that they find there and report back, not to create whole new worlds like some kind of interventionist deity, but to simply examine the concepts in their own minds and report to the audience and presumably the people who are, paying them what they find there. The artist's job is to serve the art. The art is not there to serve the artist. And the second we get back on that wavelength, I think we'll be better off as a species. You're supposed to do things because those things are valuable for their own sake, not for yours. Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Well, that was the end of the article there, and we are going to move on to something Dawn has been wanting to talk about for over a week now, or probably longer.
Oh yeah.
But first, I guess you should address the comments because there was a lot of them while we do them now.
Yeah.
Okay, where to start? Okay. All right, Dragon Turtle at 9:08. And Don, I'm gonna until like I read through like most of it because it does seem to be a broken up paragraph here.
Okay.
Yeah, just refrain for a moment.
Okay.
Dragon Turtle at 9:08. I was being a bit flippant with using the term asshole, but humans usually work together to screw over other groups of humans / species. We literally drove 909. We literally drove species to extinction because we didn't like them, and that is a large part of why we are on top. Also, 911. For instance, wolves. Those who worked with us and played by our rules became dogs. The others were killed or chased out of Europe.
I mean, yeah, but the very fact that we did domesticate the wolf sort of again implies the innate benefit to the social lucrativeness that we have. For example, the reason why humans personify objects like cars and boats and what have you is largely because we are so prone to humanizing things that it's an overactive impulse. And I don't think that that's a new phenomena or that that's in any way an evolutionary accident. Because we were able to some extent, humanize the wolf, we ended up domesticating them and got dogs. Because we're able to humanize basically any creature, we find a place for them in our civilization. Like if we were entirely like the Machiavellian equivalent to Vulcans or some shit, there would be no need for or room for pets in our society. There are. Another example. One of the ways that we drove human-like species to extinction back during the, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the ape wars, um, is we bred with them. A lot of, yes, we also killed a bunch of them, but we also bred with a bunch of them, such that humans, modern day humans, are basically a genetic hodgepodge of all of those proto-human civilizations or proto-human species. Because we took a little bit from the Cro-Magnons, a little bit from the Neanderthals, a little bit from the original Homo sapiens, and on and on and on it goes. And we kind of bred with them and kept the best bits for ourselves. And the very fact that we were able to breed with them instead of just killing all of them outright is one of the reasons, like you said, that we are on top. Because we don't just immediately jump to the Machiavellian "I'm gonna fuck this thing over" approach. We usually do some of that and some of the more socially lucrative, let's find a way to bridge the gap here somehow.
Okay. All right. Still on Dragon Turtle. It's a lot. Okay. 914 seems more like nonsense to me. The only way that makes sense of it if you assume nobody's actually honest or they don't stay that way. That was actually something you mentioned earlier. So, actually, I'm just going to move to the 916 one. Also, we can see natural human morality in children. Things good for me and my friends, or bad for my enemies, or bad. For neutral people, it's their sympathy versus how many fucks they have to give.
Yeah,
Hold on.
you.
They also don't think things through or have any principles. That's why I say strict moral codes are underrated. P.S. It's the same reason you prefer Mab to Titania.
No, wrong. Human children are not neurologically done cooking yet. You cannot use them as an example of what humans are like without civilization. You would have to take a fully neurologically developed human and give them amnesia to use that as an example. Because the thing is, again, barring childhood trauma, i.e., the kinds of things that result in cluster B personality disorders, humans gain intuitive morality by being around other humans, regardless of whether the subject of morality is brought up to them at all, especially if you give them critical thinking. Most of what we irrationally, in my opinion, go to morality for, you can resolve by just giving kids one or two classes on critical thinking every now and then. You don't need morality. The only people who need morality are the people who don't intuitively have it to some degree already or can't parse it with critical thinking, namely the people with cluster B personality disorder. Unfortunately for the rest of humanity, those people with cluster B like personality disorders tend to project their failings onto all humanity in the sense of either original sin or toxic masculinity or whatever you want to call it. Like we see this even in sociopathic serial killers. People like Ted Kaczynski, people like Jeffrey Dahmer, people like Ted Bundy. They all thought that they were the best possible version of humanity because they all assumed that everyone else neurologically worked like they did. And it is my contention that those people were in the wrong for doing that. That is where at least organized systems of morality, strict systems of morality come from. It comes from the assumption of someone looking at themselves, finding themselves wanting, and then projecting that lack, that wantingness, onto other people who otherwise wouldn't have had it. It's where you get cults from, it's where you get socio-political ideologies from, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's where you got most religions from.
Okay, you know what? I'm just going to nip this in the bud. We're done talking about this kind of stuff. We're done. I want to move on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like, it's just we're going to be here for hours, honestly, if you guys keep discussing this now.
Yes.
So, like, Dawn and Dragon Troll, if you guys want to have this discussion, I would advise, like, you guys go somewhere else. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll talk about it on Discord later, I'm sure. But, yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, so I finally saw, again, this is something Dawn wanted to talk about for over a week now, I think.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange and in the Multiverse of Madness. I finally saw it on Tuesday last week with my uncle in the theaters, and I've had time to really think about it and just kind of mull it over. So we're kind of going to do like how we did with the Batman review. Is like we're kind of going to first we're just going to give our general thoughts and stuff, and then we're going to talk maybe spoilers and then things we liked, maybe like from the technical to the writing to other things and things we don't like. Obviously, to be unbiased here as possible as we can be. And yeah, and obviously there's going to be spoilers at some point. Just so you know, if you guys haven't seen it, spoiler warning, obviously. But for like the first half, we're going to try and keep it spoiler free, I suppose. Okay. So general thoughts. It's good. I think it's good. It's probably better than a lot of Phase 4 movies that have come out lately, in my opinion. It's very much. It's also. I would also say it's very better than the first Doctor Strange movie.
I'm letting you mostly go first because obviously, this is my character, so I'm gonna say a lot. And
Right.
also I've kind of given my thoughts on some of this already on other things. So
right, yeah. Well, I'm trying not to spoil anything just yet. So, I will say this. Unfortunately, it did not really like unlike certain movies like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 or actually I think that's the only Marvel movie that's ever gotten like I didn't get emotional during this movie, which is how I generally if I know a movie's like really good, if it elicits like some type of response from me. So unfortunately,
it's one of our main differences. I usually tend to knock down movies a couple of points if they do that because I don't really judge things on emotional grounds if I can avoid it.
Fair enough, but well, okay. I think it's also like we do judge things very differently because I'm more of a character guy and stuff, and we will get into that. But yeah, general thoughts. It's a good movie. Like again, I'll get more into it, but I liked it. I don't think it's good or bad. I kind of in the. It's not terrible. It's not a terrible movie. I'll just say that. Dom.
Yeah. This movie gets a lot back with me because I knew most of what we were getting from the leaks. And while I still have a couple of problems with the movie based on stuff that they did keep from the leaks, one thing this movie does definitely do right that I specifically basically asked for repeatedly, and you can go back and look at these live streams to check if you don't believe me, is I always said, every time this topic came up, this movie should focus less on the multiverse part and more on the of madness part. The parts that reference Lovecraft and John Carpenter, because it's got a title that evokes Lovecraft on John Carpenter. It's got the guy who gave us Evil Dead and Darkman being the director. It's got a writer from Rick and Morty. It's got the composer who gave us Tim Burton's oeuvre, musically speaking. And it's got so many supernatural things that it can set up and that apparently Marvel wants to set up because of course we've got Blade coming, we've got Moon Knight coming. Obviously this was before Moon Knight came out that I said this. And we've got allegedly either the Midnight Suns or the Howling Commandos coming. So I wanted this movie to basically be a Lovecraftian horror comedy in the vein of Marvel's answer to the original Ghostbusters, or Dark Crystal, or Return to Oz, or Something Wicked This Way comes, or Labyrinth or something like that. And I think Sam Raimi was mostly on my side with regards to that argument, because it seems like he saw the title Multiverse of Madness and thought to himself, fuck the multiverse, I want to talk about the of madness part. And so, yeah, I do like this movie a lot more than I was fully expecting to see this movie and go, oh gods, look how they massacred my boy. But I didn't. Um, I ended up really, really liking this. I liked this movie a lot, and it gave me something that I never thought I would have with regards to MCU Doctor Strange, which is hope. Because after the first one, I was fairly sure that the MCU had no fucking idea who Doctor Strange was as a character, what his mythos was about, what his arc was about. Any that movie was basically just a Cliff Notes version of his origin story that had none of the actual weight behind his origin story. Um, Now, granted, Doctor Strange grew on me a little bit in Thor Ragnarok and grew on me even more in Infinity War. He basically wasn't even in Endgame because he was all but useless in that. But I will say that Endgame or Infinity War is still the best use of Doctor Strange, both as a character and just in general. I will say that while Sam Raimi definitely moves things in the right direction, i.e., the Lovecraftian horror comedy, who gives a fuck about the multiverse direction, because yeah, everyone and their mother hyper focused on the multiverse part, including the marketing and including most of the leaks. And Sam Raimi apparently was like, "No, fuck the multiverse. I want to talk about the madness part," and that was good. But it's not as good as Marvel's answer to Ghostbusters, or Marvel's answer to Labyrinth, or Marvel's answer to any of the awesome horror comedies that exist. Um, it's not even to put it in a Sam Raimi like context. It's not even as good as Army of Darkness or Evil Dead 2.
Or Ash versus Evil Dead, the
Oh
series.
yeah, or Ash vs Evil Dead the series. That being said, it's about as good as Ghostbusters Afterlife, the third Ghostbusters movie. It's not as good as Ghostbusters 1 or 2, but it's good, about on par with Ghostbusters 3. It's not as good as something like The Craft was, but it's certainly better than The Craft Legacy, because that was an abomination.
Um,
It's not as dark or as awesome as Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, which is kind of what I wanted this movie to be. I wanted this movie to be as dark and weird and supernatural as Pirates of the Caribbean 3. But it is relatively on par with Curse of the Black Pearl. So my main issue with this is that number one, the way they marketed this movie was very, very stupid, because it encouraged people to focus way too much on the multiverse part and not nearly enough on the of madness part, and made me terrified that this movie was going to be a multiverse movie guest starring Doctor Strange rather than a Doctor Strange movie with maybe some multiverse somewhere in it, which is more akin to what we got.
Okay.
And that was good.
All right. So, kind of going more into spoiler things. Things I did like of it. It looked fantastic. Like the visuals were really amazing. It was also very colorful. Like it was very comic booky, and
yeah, it made use of color, that thing that has existed in film since the 30s, but for some reason we mostly have forgotten how to use.
right. Also, this is weird, but there's also a tangibility to things as well. Even though I'm pretty sure most of the sets were CGI,
yeah,
there was still like a tangibility to it. Like there was like most of the sets themselves were built, and the CGI was only there to enhance it, which is honest was kind of the opposite of other movies in the MCU, where like this entire sets are CGI themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The characters themselves were also fun. We actually got more. There were actually more. Yeah, there was more depth put into the characters themselves. I don't think there was. You can make an argument that it wasn't. There could have been an argument that it needed more depth
Yeah.
for the characters, but it's better than kind of what we got in the first movie. Comparing that, and honestly, I'm not even like trying to. I feel like higher ups were maybe a little scared of Doctor Strange at first when they did the first movie, and thus, I don't want
Yeah,
to entirely put the
yeah,
blame on Scott Derrickson. I don't.
no, I think based on what I've heard that Scott and his usual partner and writer um uh C. Robert Cargill wanted to do, they initially wanted to make the first movie quite a bit more like this movie, and they wanted to use Nightmare as the first villain, which would have made sense because Nightmare was Doctor Strange's first adversary in the comics, and and I think this might be partially on Ike Perlmutter because this would have been back when Ike Perlmutter still had some influence, or it might be on Kevin Feige, or it might have just been on Disney's higher ups, like being like establish the character first, then we'll see how far we can push it in the next one. And while I can sympathize with that to a certain degree, because I think I'm always more lenient with first movies because um it is a first movie. It is always the job of the first movie to establish the world and the characters and the rules and whatnot.
The first movie's got to walk before the sequel can run.
Yeah, and so be it. That being said, I really want to see the alternate universe where Sam Raimi directed the first one, because I'm wondering how many of my complaints with how the MCU has handled Doctor Strange would have been obliterated to powder um, if Sam Raimi had directed the first. And again, I'm not blaming Scott Derrickson. Mostly, I blame the fact that um, Scott Derrickson wasn't allowed to work with his go-to writer, C. Robert Cargill, until like they were 2/3 of the way through the movie. And so Scott Derrickson had to solo most of the creative decisions on that first movie. The
Right.
other thing, of course, is that um, Marvel was unwilling to go as far as they should have gone with the first one. That being said, I think Sam Raimi, based on how well he worked within the Marvel machine here, could have done a lot of really interesting things with Doctor Strange one. And I'm kind of sad that he wasn't able to.
Right. I do. Okay, so I kind of want to talk a little bit about like the technical aspects a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I already mentioned like the visuals are amazing, and the color and stuff. Uh, um, the cinematography as well. Like Sam Raimi has always been a master of like just amazing, like tracking shots and just out of like the worldly like taking comic panels and making them shots in a movie.
Yeah.
Also, Danny Elfman's music.
Yeah, and again, this is another one of those areas where, despite the fact that I really, really like Michael Giacchino, in fact, I was really excited when they said that he was going to be doing the music on Doctor Strange 1. It really feels like Michael Giacchino just didn't care about Doctor Strange because he literally recycled his main Star Trek Beyond theme for Doctor Strange and just added a sitar riff to it. Whereas Danny Elfman, the composer what put Tim Burton on the map and gave us the Batman theme that defined a generation, he seems right at home within the gothic, weird, quasi-Lovecraftian space that Doctor Strange operates within. And yes, while some of his music seems a little bit derivative of the stuff that he did with Tim Burton, number one, it's never a one-to-one. Like Doctor Strange's original theme was a one-to-one copy of Michael Giacchino's Star Trek Beyond theme. But whereas there's still a very Burton-like style in Doctor Strange too, with Danny Elfman's music. But number one, that kind of works inherently for Doctor Strange, and number two, because Danny Elfman and Sam Raimi are both picking up where Scott Derrickson and company left off. Danny Elfman actually manages to, in some places throughout the movie, take Michael Giacchino's original theme and Elfmanize it so that it has a more gothic Burton-like quality. And it makes Doctor Strange's character theme much more interesting, and I hope to God they keep it like this. I hope to God they keep Danny Elfman's reskin or retooling of Michael Giacchino's theme, because it's a much better Doctor Strange theme now.
I had something. Okay, I want to get. Okay, I want to let's just out because I don't really think I have a lot to say with this aspect. But the acting, I think out of all of them, Benedict Cumberbatch was like the best.
I don't know. I gotta give it to Elizabeth Olsen. She really brought some. She really brought some mad energy to Scarlet Witch here.
All right. Yeah, I would. Okay, in my listing, I honestly would say it would be Benedict Cumberbatch and Elizabeth Olsen in that order in terms of acting. Not to say no one. I honestly think everyone did their best. It's just I think those two kind of stood out the most to me.
Yeah, my problem with MCU Doctor Strange is they for some reason won't let him behave like Doctor Strange. They won't let him be the world-weary mystical scholar who has to bear the entire weight of the universe on his shoulders. They won't let him speak in, fluent thesaurus and fluent purple prose. And so they have to stark eyes him and his dialogue. And it really cuts even if Benedict Cumberbatch had the emotional range to pull off the kind of inherent gravitas that Doctor Strange is supposed to have, the dialogue doesn't let him go there.
Okay.
And yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to finish your thought. I was just gonna kind of segue that to. I guess we should talk about the script.
Yeah, this is the only place. This is the only place where this movie fails, and I blame it on Michael Waldron. Because while I think he did really good work on Rick and Morty, his work on Loki was mostly just passable, like forgettable.
Right.
And it really seems like he's just not an experienced enough writer to balance a multi-million-dollar Marvel movie.
You know what's weird? Ironically, like, okay, the thing is, like, I don't disagree. I think, like, maybe 90% of the script could have been worked on better. It's got moments. Like, the movie has moments in it that are really good.
Like, you can almost tell when Sam Raimi takes over the writing versus when Michael Waldron is doing it.
Okay. No, please finish your thing.
Because when I think they let Sam Raimi into the writer's room a little bit, you get almost like Evil Dead levels of character development. Whereas when it's Michael Waldron doing it, it's very, very, very cheesy not in a good way. When Sam Raimi's doing it, it's cheesy in a good way. When it's Michael Waldron doing it, it's cheesy in the I just got out of writing school way.
Right. Okay. So I honestly, and I don't know if you've seen this movie, Dalton, but the guy who wrote the screenplay, David Lowery, who directed and wrote the movie The Green Knight, I think would have been a better choice to write.
That would have been a good choice. Honestly, here's my olive branch to Marvel Studios. Keep Sam Raimi for the love of all the things. Keep Sam Raimi as the director. But bring back both C. Robert Cargill and Scott Derrickson to do the writing. Because those three working together, having now all had some experience of how you do Marvel movies, could make a very interesting Marvel movie, and they probably all could be convinced to do it. However, the best case scenario, that's the realistic, entirely plausible, you should do this because if not, you're dumb answer. But the best case scenario, as much as I enjoyed Sam Raimi, is you get Guillermo del Toro in there to do the directing and the producing, and you get Michael Dougherty, he of Godzilla King of Monsters, Trick or Treat, and Krampus fame, and you get Mike Flanagan of Haunting of Hill House and Dr. Sleep fame to do the writing. That would be probably the best case scenario. And there's another writer who I would throw in there as a third potential writer. He did, I think it was The Strain. It might have, yeah, I think it was The Strain. He also did Twilight Saga Eclipse, which is the best of those movies and the most self-aware of those movies, which is why I'm thinking of including him.
Right. Okay. Besides, I think we've covered all the technical aspects we can cover.
Yeah.
So you want to cover okay, this is where it really gets into the spoiler stuff. So I guess you mentioned Wanda earlier, so I guess we'll start with her, who is the main villain.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll be fully honest. I fully expected that they would hold off on introducing her as the villain.
Yeah, no, they
Like she'd be the twist villain, you know?
Yeah, no, they make it very, 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 very obvious very, very quickly that Wanda has gone bye-bye. He gone, and it is now the Scarlet Witch.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. Elizabeth Olsen just has so much fun in this role.
Mm-hmm. And calling back to something that I almost mentioned earlier before we got into spoilers, one of the things that bothers me about the way they write Doctor Strange, in that they don't let him have his gravitas, and they don't let him have his purple prose, and they don't have him, spouting the entire thesaurus every time he talks, like he should, is that they let Scarlet Witch have those moments, especially in the scene where she and Strange are talking, and she is talking about how she was trying to be reasonable. That speech, it both made me squeal a little bit inside in happiness, but also really annoyed me because that's the way Doctor Strange should talk. Like that very considered, very old world, very very grandiose way of speaking is the way Doctor Strange is supposed to talk. But every time he starts talking that way, like he should, they fuck it up by throwing in another Starkism, and it annoys me.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, like honestly, like the whole her reasoning is also believable too, and this ending scene before she kills herself, or I don't know if she does or not. Probably not.
Yeah, my thinking is she found a way to teleport herself out when it came down, and that's why there was the giant red flare.
Right. The scene where she meets her other version self and sees what she's become when trying to get to her children. It didn't like the weird thing is I think it's a good moment. It really is. I just unfortunately I did not have an emotional reaction to it. But I could see that it was a good moment for that character.
Yeah. But here's the thing. A lot of people have been complaining about this because Doctor Strange literally telegraphs this at the beginning of the movie. He literally says to her, "What are you gonna do to alternate Wanda, Scarlet Witch? You know, what's gonna happen to alternate Wanda when you get to that universe and she's already there with your kids?" Um, and a lot of people got annoyed with that because they were saying he literally told you this, and now when push comes to shove, it turned out he was right. But here's the thing. Number one, that's good because it means that the main impetus for the climax is still at least partially on Doctor Strange, i.e., he called it. And two, it's meant to signify the difference between hypothetically doing something in your fantasies versus actually going through with it in real life. Because when Doctor Strange points this out to her in the orchard that she has, when she reveals that she's the villain, when he points this out to her, she just shrugs and goes, "Well, basically sucks to be her." But when she's actually faced with the real life consequences of it, she can't go through with it because killing someone in potentiala is all well and good, i.e., we can all sit here and say, to get what I want, I'd let the world burn. But saying, oh yeah, I would nonchalantly hit the nuclear button is one thing. Actually being faced with, there's the nuclear button, go ahead and push it, is quite a different thing. So it's demonstrating the difference between, okay, yeah, I'd be willing to do this hypothetically, versus, okay, now you're actually in the situation, Wanda. What are you gonna do?
Right. Um. America Chavez. If we're going like a list of characters here, she was fine. And nothing against the actress, and she wasn't written to be super obnoxious or anything.
Yeah, no, they. This is the thing. A lot of people, for whatever reason, think that this movie was woke. But the thing is, it's not, because they could have very easily done with America Chavez what they did with Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. Had her speaking Spanglish the entire time, had her spouting off about my patriarchy and my holy menstruation and all that shit. But they chose not to. They fixed her character by sanding off all the rough edges and just making her a little girl who's had a rough life because she sucked her mom's away through a portal and now has been on the run through the multiverse for presumably like 10 years.
Yeah, the flashback made her like she's what, like maybe 15, 16 years old. Actually, I should probably look up the actress's age.
Yeah, she's like 14, 15 in the movie, and in the flashback she's like 4 or 5. So like 10 years on the run through the multiverse, having for all intents and purposes killed your own mothers. So yeah. And she does sass Wong and Doctor Strange here and there. But the thing is, as much as I hate this, especially with regards to Doctor Strange, every character in the Marvel Universe sasses every other character in the Marvel Universe. Because everyone is basically trying to capture that same snarky Tony Stark energy for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah, she's 16.
Yeah, and I think the character she's playing is like 14 because I think she mentioned that in a interview. But yeah, I didn't mind America Chavez, and here's the thing.
Sorry. You do your thought, and then I'll say mine.
Okay, the thing with Multiverse of Madness, and this is both a positive and a negative, for me at least. Everyone and their mother, when they saw the title Multiverse of Madness, hyper focused on the multiverse and forgot the of madness part. I'm glad that Sam Raimi, like me, said, no, the more interesting part of Multiverse of Madness is the of madness part. However, this isn't the magical equivalent of something like Civil War or No Way Home. This is the magical equivalent of Captain America the Winter Soldier. And you can actually trace Captain America's Winter Soldier's character dynamics and the way that the screen time is broken up onto this movie. You've got, obviously, Strange is taking Captain America's position. You've got Wong taking Black Widow's position. You've got Wanda taking Bucky's position. And you've got America Chavez taking Sam Wilson's position. This movie is basically for Doctor Strange what Captain America the Winter Soldier was to the Captain America franchise. Now, granted, it's better, I think, than Captain America the Winter Soldier. Number one, because more interesting things happen in it, because, you know, the cosmological magic is more interesting than the street level stuff, just in general. But also because Doctor Strange 1 is nowhere near as good as Captain America 1 was. So changing things from Doctor Strange 1 to Doctor Strange 2, a lot less was lost in the translation than was lost when they made the transition from Captain America the First Avenger to Captain America Winter Soldier. But just like Captain America Winter Soldier was darker than the first Captain America, so too this movie is darker than Doctor Strange 1. Just like, you know, the Winter Soldier was a heavy fixture in Winter Soldier, so too in this movie, the Scarlet Witch or Wanda is a heavy fixture in the movie. Just like, you know, Black Widow kind of operates as Captain America's closest friend and confidant, so too Wong in this movie, closest friend and confidant. And just like Sam Wilson is kind of a secondary presence stroke character establishment, and takes up maybe a fourth of the screen time. So too in this movie, America Chavez basically fills the Sam Wilson role. And for those anti-woke black pill types, I will give you this olive branch. You guys do realize they turned her into the MacGuffin, so they didn't even make her a major character. They turned her into part damsel in distress and part living MacGuffin. In other words, they did. Huh?
Basically, R2D2.
Yeah. In other words, they did what Diversity in Comics, or your boy Zach, back when he was called Diversity in Comics, used to call purse puppying. And you would think that the fact that they basically sanded off all of America Chavez's annoying personality quirks and turned her into a living MacGuffin would make the anti-woke types happy, because better that than the patriarchy, you know, spewing, holy menstruation shouting, Spanglish speaking bitch that was in the comics. But apparently no, that wasn't enough for the anti-woke. Also, a lot of people complained at the end of WandaVision that Wanda wasn't portrayed as a villain. At the end of WandaVision. Well, they definitely fixed that here, and yet I've seen people like Mahler and Nerdrotic and basically the cast of EFAP saying they treat Wanda like she's insane. And I'm like, you mean exactly how you wanted her to be portrayed at the end of WandaVision? In other words, they're giving you exactly what you want by having her being warped out of proportion by the Darkhold?
You can't face anyone, man, honestly.
Yeah, it's annoying because, like,
okay,
there's obvious ways that they could have, that you can look at this movie and say it's addressing the problems of WandaVision and of America Chavez's character. But instead of seeing it as the movie is trying to address those problems, they're seeing it as the movie is trying to sweep under the rug the fact that Wanda was the villain in WandaVision. And it's like, no, it's not. if it was trying to do that, she wouldn't be a villain here, but she very evidently is.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Back to American Chavez. Yeah. I mean, okay. Again, full disclosure, the movie just didn't really hook me in the ways that I would prefer it to hook me.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, and like Mary Chavez was a good character in this movie, had an arc and stuff. Um, and yeah, like again, personally, I didn't really feel anything at any of the moments where you're supposed to feel something. I'm sure, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, she and like the actress was really good too. Like she like for a young actress, she really was good. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and like I could really buy that it was a kid who is like street smarts in terms of multiversal travel,
Yeah.
but also someone who is scared of what they can do. Honestly, it's almost like a Billy Kaplan sort of situation. Um, someone who's fearful of their own power.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You still podcasting?
Yes.
Hey, if you get a chance, I might come out and look at this moon. It's beautiful. It's got that blood moon tonight.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. If you get a chance, come out.
Okay. Anyway, sorry
uh,
about that. My uncle wanted to ask me something.
uh,
But you were saying, her being fearful of her own power.
yeah.
Yeah,
She
and at no point does she doesn't pull the Captain Marvel arrogant beyond all reason thing, or the Rey from Star Wars hyper competent for no reason thing either.
no.
She eventually owns up to her power after a pep talk from Doctor Strange, and ends up having to give Wanda exactly what she wants because she can't beat her.
Mhm.
So there is no woke Mary Sue in this movie. I mean, you could make the argument for Wanda, but Wanda has always, like, the Scarlet Witch is by nature an emotionally unstable Mary Sue character who can warp reality out of proportion. And
Um,
at no point is that considered a good thing in this movie. So,
um, okay. Guess we should also address the Illuminati because that was a big thing that was in the marketing as well.
yeah, honestly, I get why they were here, but you could have cut out everything to do with alternate universes in this movie, and it wouldn't have affected my enjoyment at all.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I liked the Illuminati in this because they had an interesting backstory with the previous Strange of 833. I think was it 883?
A couple seconds, but the moon is amazing.
But what was I saying? I'm glad that they fixed Black Bolt in particular because fuck you, Scott Buck. You don't have to unnecessarily ground comic books. Comic books and comic book based media are supposed to be comic booky, and they fixed Black Bolt here. No longer can he speak at a normal human volume and just the building around him falls down. This is a man who will leave a crater in a moon just by whispering.
Right. I thought they were cool. I can under. It's just. And again, I like the backstory they had with the Doctor Strange of that world, which I thought was really
Yeah.
cool.
And I liked that the 838 Doctor Strange's costume was more along the lines of pre Sorcerer Supreme's Doctor Strange's costume in the comics. Like his cape is blue rather than the red cloak of levitation, because cloak of levitation was actually something that he didn't get in the comics until he inherited it from the Ancient One after the Ancient One died in the comics, which was 10 years of writing history, both in real time and in actuality, because this was when the comics moved in real time, before he became Sorcerer Supreme. I mean, obviously I like that they introduced the cloak in the first movie, and I like that they made it alive and whatnot, but nevertheless, it was a nice little Easter egg to the comics that 838 Doctor Strange is wearing his first comic book costume, basically.
Honestly, and like this is again, I'm not trying to like insult Benedict Cumberbatch, but when he played that specific version of Doctor Strange, like even hold on, Cliff Sucrose, if Inhumans replace X-Men, things are okay.
I mean,
I'm up
I
too
kind
much.
of want. I'd like both of them. Both of them.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, why not both? Is my answer to that. But
I think the main thing is they're not interchangeable. Like Inhumans are not mutants, and mutants are not Inhumans.
yeah, the big problem with the various superpowered humanoid beings in the Marvel universe is in the comics, literally everyone, for some reason, had a bone to pick with Earth back in the day, and genetically experimented on proto-humans back in the day. The Celestials experimented on proto-humans, and you got the Eternals and the Deviants out of it. The Kree experimented on proto-humans, and you got the Inhumans and everything to do with the Terrigen mist out of it. The High Evolution. I think it was the High Evolutionary who actually created the mutant X gene originally, but I'd have to double check that.
But yeah, they were serviceable. Like the Illuminati in this show, in those scenes on that Earth, they were serviceable.
Yeah. And again, I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad that the multiverse elements didn't overtake the movie.
Right. I'm sure most people would say, and I agree to an extent that they went out like bitches.
Yeah, but they're up against a fully empowered version of the Scarlet Witch, so sucks to be you're cannon fodder now. Sorry.
Yeah.
And interesting note, and again, this is one of those things that you would think the anti-woke brigade, of which, we're both ostensibly part of, but the more black-pilled and cynical members of the anti-woke brigade, for some reason, really hated this sequence, and I don't really know why. Because if you look at when Wanda is fighting alternate universe Captain Marvel, who is Maria Rambeau instead of Carol Danvers, Wanda is able to absorb Captain Marvel's energy in the same way that Agatha Harkness is able to absorb her Coven's energy in WandaVision. That's why Maria Rambeau goes out like a bitch and is able to be crushed by a statue. Because when Maria Rambeau is lying there on the floor, she's fully human again. She doesn't have the Tesseract mixed with space junk energy of Captain Marvel, because Wanda has gone, oh, that's nice cosmic power you have there. It's really impressive at all, but it's mine now.
Right.
So you're human again, and therefore you're subject to normal human constraints, and therefore I'm going to crush you with a statue.
Right.
For anyone that didn't catch that, yes, that was a reference to something that apparently witches can do in the MCU now, that we saw Agatha using, and also is a key feature of what Wanda can do in this movie, because of course she wants to absorb America's energy so that she can absorb her powers.
Right.
Well, she does that same thing to Maria Rambeau, Captain Marvel, and that's why Maria Rambeau is human again when Wanda smashes the statue down on her. For anyone that didn't catch that.
Mm, right, and their deaths were actually actually kind of set up in their introductions.
Yeah, and I like that it was very much their own hubris that brought them down.
Yeah, like,
Because
they were
because
super arrogant about
yeah,
it.
Maria was like, "Oh, we'll handle your little witch," and I'm like even the first time I watched it, I was like, press X to doubt on that one. And it turns out that the entire universe was like press X to doubt because, um, yeah, it turns out they could not. And Strange tries to explain this to them repeatedly, and they're just like, "No, you are the biggest threat to the universe, Strange." And it's like, okay, but the Scarlet Witch of Legend is coming to kill your asses, and I'm not gonna feel sympathy for you now. Bye.
Right. Yeah. Uh, what else? I guess we should talk about Dark Strange and the scene, and Dalton's favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah, okay. Backstory for my favorite scene. Um, in Doctor Strange 1, and this was one of the better parts of Doctor Strange 1, the Ancient One explains magic as the source code that shapes reality, and she refers to spells as a programming language. So you would think this would mean that they can manipulate the logical underpinnings of empirical reality rather than just the empirical forces of reality themselves. And yet we never see magic used, or at least we hadn't up until this point, see magic used to weaponize like logical constructs. We only ever see it used um, to create energy constructs of literal weapons, or to do very simple manipulations of physical forces. Um, and I've been saying for years that I wanted to see Doctor Strange weaponize concepts. And I think even a couple of times I literally mentioned I want to see Doctor Strange weaponize music. And off the cuff like cavalier thing that I mentioned. But so help me Vishanti, in this movie there is a fight wherein Doctor Strange and his evil alternate universe variant that's absorbed by the Darkhold weaponize the tangible concept, like the platonic concept of music, in the same way that Polka Dot Man in DC's Suicide Squad 2 utilizes his polka dots. And I loved it.
Right. I also I want to point out two things. One is regarding, because I looked up the soundtrack for Multiverse of Madness, and I looked at the piece for that scene, and it is called Lethal Symphonies.
Yes.
It's fun fact there.
Yes. And further fun fact, the two Stranges weaponize particular pieces of classical music. In the case of our Strange, he weaponizes Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and in the case of Dark Strange, he weaponizes the famous Bach organ music that is usually used in like cheap haunted houses and horror movies to denote sinister things going on,
Right.
which was a very nice touch.
It really is. I just found that out. Okay. I do want to also point out the scene that I kind of like overall in the whole movie comes before the Lethal Symphonies.
Yeah.
Scene, which is where the two doctors are talking to themselves of how Strange can prove who he is, that he is another Strange to this Dark Strange, where he talks about like his sister, I believe, what's her name again?
Donna in the movie and the comics, but in the 2007 animated movie, they changed her name to April.
Okay, Donna. And that scene, and it's very subtle. and this is like a merit to Cumberbatch's acting, is you could see almost like kind of subtle tears beginning to rise from his eyes as he's
Mhm.
talking about it. Like he's
Also,
like it's
it's a nice credit to Sam Raimi that even though I felt like some of the character stuff was forced with Doctor Strange in this movie, he is very good at keeping a consistent through line of like character growth because at every turn in this movie, the question that is asked of our Doctor Strange, or one of the questions that is asked of our Doctor Strange, is what would you do to be happy, or are you happy, or what does it mean to be happy? Um, and so much of the camaraderie between the two strangers in this scene is focused around Dark Strange used the Darkhold in the hopes of being happy and found that he couldn't be. So he now goes through universes and kills alternate versions of himself because he figures that if they can't be happy, he might as well spare them the agony of living in a world where they can't be happy. Um, and meanwhile, um, the main thing that everyone tempts Doctor Strange with throughout this movie is, you know, what do I need to offer you for you to let me do my thing? Wanda says the same thing. I think in the very first scene we have of her in the Garden of Doom there. Um, what if there was a world in the multiverse where you were happy? Wouldn't you be willing to do anything to get there? Or when she confronts him again, she says, um, if you let me have what I want, I'll open a door um I'll open a door to a multiverse where you and Christine can be happy or something along those lines. And the thing that Dark Strange shoves in the face of our Doctor Strange is, are you happy, Stephen? Um and frankly, it was also a nice touch because there's a famous Doctor Strange story called What Is It That Disturbs You, Stephen? And I don't know if that was a deliberate evocation of that, but it was a nice touch nonetheless.
overall, I think it could have been better.
Yeah.
Like the movie itself could be better, specifically with like the script. I think overall it's not bad. It just there could be it could they could have done.
No, I think it's just that Michael Waldron is still a young and fairly inexperienced writer. He's mostly written for TV or TV shows before, and he's not ready to go up to the big leagues. I think that if they just let Sam Raimi write the thing, like if Sam Raimi and Kevin Feige sat down and worked out what needs to happen in this movie for, you know, continuity reasons, it would have worked out better. Um, I also think, like I said, the elements that I liked could have gone much further. And one thing I've found with this movie is I really, really wish that this could have been the first movie, because then the growth that's necessary would have still been to come. But unfortunately, because Sam Raimi showed up, you know, a franchise with a franchise in, you know, in media res, you know, already in progress, um, now either Doctor Strange needs to show up in a couple more movies in between now and his third movie to get where he needs to go, which I'm fine with, or Sam Raimi needs to just go hog wild with the third one. And hopefully, this movie does well enough at the box office that Marvel feels comfortable with him going hog wild in the third one.
Right.
But nevertheless, like I said, the one thing that this movie has going for it, despite the fact that it doesn't go far enough, despite the fact that it's not as a superhero movie, the closest analogy to it is Captain America: Winter Soldier, and as a horror comedy, the closest analogy to it is Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl, or Evil Dead 1, or the movie Happy Death Day. That's the relative pair we're in here. But this movie did give me hope because it proved that they can move in the right direction with Doctor Strange. And if they keep moving in this direction, if they keep allowing his arc to progress in this direction, someday soon we will get the pathologically humble Doctor Strange from the comics, who is so self-sacrificing that it almost seems like he has a death wish. And that's the main difference between comic Strange's arc and movie Strange's arc. Movie comic Strange's arc was mostly done after his origin, i.e., he had been an arrogant bastard who had gotten the shit beat out of him and now was so worried about becoming arrogant again that he actually um, cycles back through the other side of the mirror and becomes pathologically humble and self-sacrificial to the point that it's a death wish. This Strange um, is working on becoming less arrogant and more humble up until this movie. And I think what we see in the end of this movie is a sign that he's going to become the trying so hard not to be arrogant that he actually becomes pathologically humble character that we see in the comics. Or at least I hope that's the direction they move with him. Unfortunately, I worry slightly about Marvel allowing that to happen because it very much seems like they're setting up his "it's not about you" arc is going to result in him being replaced. I really, really, really don't like that. But hopefully, Sam Raimi will be there to ease us through, and we will get at least one movie of pathologically humble, pathologically grandiose, and pathologically old world mannerism to Doctor Strange. I hope.
And I also want to just briefly mention before we move on to the next thing. Um, I loved the zombie Strange or the undead puppet Strange.
Yeah, the dream walked into his own alternate universe corpse. Strange.
It was very like the introduction of it was so Sam Raimi.
Yeah, and kudos to you, Sam, for getting the souls of the damned, unironically, in a Marvel movie.
Like honestly, like full disclosure, I don't know why, but I fully wanted I kind of want a spinoff with like a zombie Strange or like a dead or like a undead Strange that he uses the souls of the damned constantly and have the cape that he did and stuff.
Yeah, honestly,
Just because like I like heroes that don't look like traditional heroes that look
Yeah.
like monsters per se or villainous
yeah.
evil.
Also, honestly, the only major problems with this movie are the two best scenes don't go on long enough. The two best scenes, of course, being the weaponizing music scene was like 2 or 3 minutes, and it should have been like 20. And the undead Dreamwalk Strange probably could have been 10 or 20 minutes as well, and it was only like 10. So yeah, that's the only problem is this movie goes in the right direction. It just doesn't go far enough in that right direction.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the trailers. This one I felt like we kind of needed to talk about because Dolan talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
The Avatar 2, The Way of Water official teaser trailer. Full disclosure, I do not care, and I might not provide much commentary here.
Yeah, no, I don't care about Avatar for its own sake as much as I bitch and moan and whine and complain that people should view art as an end in and of itself rather than a means to an end. In this case, I very much view Avatar as a means to an end because I want these movies to be just successful enough to justify a sequel so that James Cameron is a VFX workhorse because the only aspect of Avatar that is worth giving a damn about is that it is a technical achievement. And given that Avatar technically, i.e., in the sense of technical aspects, changed Hollywood because every single blockbuster after Avatar came out copied stuff it learned from Avatar. Um, I want, I want, I almost said Sam Raimi. I want James Cameron to make 4 more of those because one of the problems with the Doctor Strange franchise and the Guardians franchise and a lot of the other weirder cosmic franchises is they can't go as far as they need to go because the technical apparatuses to go that far aren't there just yet. But with 4 more Avatar movies, we could get there. That being said, Avatar is a very shitty franchise with very poor writing, no characters worth giving a damn about, and the only thing that is remarkable about them or about the first one, was the technical aspect. So, also James Cameron is an arrogant son of a bitch who thinks he can do no wrong, and has spent the last 10 years crapping all over superhero movies. So if Avatar 2 makes just enough to justify a sequel, but still ends up losing to Shazam 2 in terms of box office, I'll be happy. Like, have it make enough money to make a profit, and have enough money to justify the second sequel, and the third sequel, and the fourth sequel, and whatever. But don't have it make more than $1 billion or so. My money, and also that my prediction is that Avatar 2 will make about $877 million. But I could easily see a situation where Shazam 2 makes about as much as Aquaman did. And if that happens, where Avatar makes enough to be profitable but loses to Shazam 2, and James Cameron nevertheless, despite being able to make the other ones, has to eat humble pie, I'll be happy.
Banana?
Yeah, banana.
I mean, it's definitely a teaser.
Yeah, I not only does it look identical to the first one, it looks worse in some ways than the first one did.
And that might actually be the quality because it was kind of low.
Yeah, maybe. But nevertheless, despite there being a 13-year gap between Avatar sequels, despite the technical aspects being the only selling point of this franchise so far, it doesn't seem like James Cameron has spent the last 10 years making any technical innovations. And that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say, honestly.
I can't be arsed to care. Again, my only interest in this franchise so far is, like Judge Claude Frollo in Hunchback of Notre Dame, this poor lonesome creature may prove someday to be of use to me. Yeah.
Sorry, I just
Moving on.
moving
Banana.
on. I don't know. I will say it does seem a little more saturated to my memory of Avatar. I haven't watched it in a while.
Yeah, to some degree, I guess.
I'm more just pointing that out. That's neither good nor bad in this case. I'm just that could be because like there's a lot of water and stuff, a lot of different variations of colors. Where I believe in the first one we just had like a bunch of greens and the blues.
Yeah, it was just blue, green, and a little bit of yellow on the bantha wings there.
I'm talking about the original.
Yeah,
Like,
no.
The only other scene I think that really had like really pops of color was it's like the luminescent trees. Thing.
Yeah, the tree that resembled like a sea anemone kind of and glowed bioluminescently.
Yeah. I don't remember anything in that movie.
It's because there really wasn't much there other than the stuff that it swiped from Pocahontas, Dances with Wolves, and Ferngully. And that's the other thing with Avatar. Dear James Cameron, there have been almost no environmentalist movies that have been anything other than preachy. Like even Wall-E, the parts of Wall-E that are actually good are the parts that focus on the relationship between Wall-E and Eva. The environmentalism part is just kind of there.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to say. Sour?
Mm-hmm.
Banana?
Banana.
Okay. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be weird when I say it, but I mean, it is photorealistic, obviously, but the weirdest thing is, it seems more like built for a game engine than
A movie.
yeah.
Yeah. Like it. Yeah, it doesn't. Again, I will admit I have major problems with the first movie. Um, most of them relating to apathy. I think the first movie actually looks better than this, which is really, really counterintuitive because you would think, given that he's poured his heart, his blood, sweat, and tears into this movie since the last one came out, you'd think he would have come up with some new gimmick or new technical achievement, but no, it actually looks worse. And I think it might just be that James Cameron is getting old and he's lost touch with what people actually want.
I
But
don't really,
banana.
don't really have anything else to say. So.
Yeah, banana.
I know one thing. Wherever we go,
I don't know. Like, I don't know how to like. I don't hate it or anything. It's just
No, it's just apathy, and
yeah.
and this is the problem. He's James Cameron appears to be unaware of the fact that like the very second a lot of people got home from the theaters, the spell was broken of the first Avatar, and so a lot of people have retaliated from basically being conned by the first movie by spending the last 10 years memeing the shit out of Avatar and saying how bad it was by pointing out that it was basically a ripoff of Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas, and Ferngully.
Like, okay, so well, if anyone's ever seen my work on my actual channel, on my original channel,
Mm-hmm.
I do rewrites and pitches for things, effectively overglorified fan fiction or ripoffs, basically.
He's very good at it, though, folks. Don't let him undersell himself. To be fair.
Okay. Besides the point, I'm fine if at least take inspiration from other things. I'm fine with that. I do that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately there's nothing new under the sun. But
No,
if you're going to take inspiration from things, you have to explore some aspect of those things that's never been explored before, or add
right.
something new that's never been added before, or create something more interesting than the sum of its parts, and there just isn't any of that in Avatar.
Yeah, it just like it feels like even if they were to like give you like and they might have in the past. I have no idea. I haven't looked into this movie because, again, it's more apathy. I just don't care about it. They could have a full in-depth detail of like the lore and stuff.
Yeah, a dossier of Avatar lore, basically.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm sure it would be interesting, but there doesn't seem to be put any of that even alluded to in here, in like these movies.
No. Also, I'm gonna say something really, really hilarious now, and I'm gonna feel bad for it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Imagine if James Cameron put this kind of effort into adapting the proper Avatar, i.e., the Nickelodeon anime from the 2000s. Imagine a live action Avatar: The Last Airbender movie with this kind of budget and this kind of effort put into it. That would be some cinema redefining shit.
Although, you know what would be weird? Like, just something crossed my mind. I know there's a director, and I fully... it's actually the guy who did Godzilla King of Monsters. But what if James Cameron directed an adaptation of the Metal Gear Solid movies?
Yeah, that would be bad. Especially considering that the anime movie that James Cameron produced and Robert Rodriguez directed, Alita Battle Angel, was a really good anime movie. So if James Cameron wasn't such a genre hating son of a bitch and actually embraced genre, can you imagine the kind of movies he would give us in like the video game genre or the anime genre, or God forbid if he ever actually got off his high horse and made a comic book movie? It would be so good, but he's such an arrogant bastard and so out of touch and such an aristocratic toff that he won't do it. And he won't learn from any of the... And this is the other thing. If this movie learned from the criticism people levied at the first movie, or if he had his finger on the pulse of people and understood that, he had to prove himself again, he probably could have. He probably could have adjusted this movie so that it did fill every box that people have levied at it. He probably would have created a new interesting story, or he probably would have upped the ante on the technical achievements more. But because he's such an arrogant bastard and he views other people's criticisms as inherently invalid, he'll never learn from his mistakes. And so he'll keep making those mistakes. And so when it turns out that even though the first Avatar made $2.8 billion, this movie is going to be lucky if it cracks 800 billion or 800 million. So,
sorry, it's just you were reiterating something. So
yeah, go ahead. Banana.
This family is our fortress.
I don't really have anything to say.
Yeah, I got nothing other than I hope this movie does just well enough to justify a sequel, but not well enough to beat Shazam 2, so that A, we get more Avatar movies so that James Cameron can continue to be a VFX workhorse, and B, James Cameron has to eat a piece of humble pie and deal with the fact that he was bested by a superhero movie. That would be the best case scenario, in my opinion. He makes enough to make another one, but not enough to beat Shazam 2. That's a win for me. This poor loathsome creature may prove someday to be of use to me, basically is how I'm viewing this.
Right, okay. Yeah. I honestly don't think we're going to do a review of this movie just because I don't care enough to see it.
there's nothing there. And again, I want this movie to do just well enough to make another one, but not well enough to beat Shazam 2 or Black Adam. Because I want James Cameron to continue being a VFX workhorse, but I also want him to be taken down several pegs and to stop and have to assess himself. Moving on.
Yeah. All right, so we're moving on to the last thing of the night, which is
the Orville.
Yeah, the Orville New Horizons official trailer. So for those who don't know what the Orville is, it is basically Seth MacFarlane's
attempt to make Star Trek without making Star Trek.
Yeah, I'd honestly say it takes a little inspiration from like Babylon 5, maybe also a little bit of Farscape or Farspace.
No, it's Farscape.
Yeah, Farscape.
Yeah. Also, I forget the show that parodied Star Trek. Fuck. Forget. But yeah, it literally has some of the same writers as Star Trek: The Next Generation did.
And, yeah, it's like originally when it first came out, like when I saw the trailer for it, I legitimately thought it was going to be a Star Trek parody, and it kind of is.
Yeah, and that's what it sold itself as.
Yeah,
but it's also a lot more than that, and it actually can do something that Star Trek cannot do, because in the Star Trek universe, humanity has evolved to the point where they no longer make jokes or meme, or like everyone in Star Trek has a very notable respect for the classics, but they don't really make their own culture. Whereas because Seth MacFarlane is a comedian, he can get away with his characters acting more like humans.
I just remember the scene where there's this whole thing in Moclan culture, which is Bortus the security chief. No, not security chief.
Yeah, basically the off-brand gay Klingons.
Yeah. The scene where it's this whole massive ceremony about him taking a leak.
Mm-hmm.
Also, that Bortus is like one of my favorite characters on that show.
I don't blame you.
Like, it's not even the fact that he's gay. Like, honestly, I didn't like before. Like, they showed his husband. I didn't, because his race is entirely male, mostly.
Yeah.
Kind of.
The female Moclans are extremely rare, so male pairings is the default for Moclans.
Yeah. And like, if they never shown his husband, I never would have guessed he was gay. Honestly, I never even considered him having any romantic feelings or anything.
Yeah, personally, I like Isaac. Isaac is my favorite character.
Oh yeah, he's cool too. Like, he's really cool. He's really cool. He reminds me a lot of. He's like a kind of funnier version of Data from
yeah,
from The Next Generation.
And that's the thing, because sorry, my back is bothering me. Because the Orville isn't as beholden to humanity has evolved to a higher mode of thinking as Star Trek is. Instead of just a Star Trek parody, the Orville is basically, what if humanity of today eventually evolved into a Star Trek-like universe? And in a way, that makes the Orville more relatable, more three-dimensional.
It's kind of like Star Trek Enterprise, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Which is
well, especially given the level of technology, because, of course, a big change in the Orville universe is humanity hasn't cracked transporter technology yet. They haven't cracked teleportation.
Yeah. But all, it's a really engaging series. Like, like it is episodic, but it's also it has overarching themes that
Yeah,
happen.
while there is the occasional MacGuffin or monster of the week, there's also long running plot threads like the
Uh,
Kalons now.
and also the kind of civil war that's happening on Mocklin.
And also what are the discount Cardassian Romulan things? The Krill. There we go.
They're actually really interesting, even though like we haven't seen a lot of them. They're really interesting as a species.
Yeah, and while it's a very obvious and kind of belabored thing, I like the kind of spin on them being like religious fundamentalists, almost like space Muslims. Because that's not something you could get away with, especially on modern Star Trek. So it's
Right,
cool.
but it's also the thing of like they don't like. There's also individuals in them as well, like that
Yeah,
one episode where-
obviously the best way to do a villainous race is to make them just as, for lack of a better word, humanoid as anyone else. I.e., most people who are evil aren't evil because they want to be evil. They're evil because they're warped and traumatized in some way,
right, like I
and they
like
want what they want.
episode where fuck, what is Seth MacFarlane's character's name?
Um, I know he's the captain, but I don't remember his name.
I remember Gordon. No, was it Gordon or was it? Fuck, it's been so long since I've seen the show, and I feel
Yeah,
bad.
no, it's Gordon. Gordon is the redheaded pilot dude.
Dude, he is fucking hilarious. I love him, but it's again, it's almost the weird thing is I would almost compare it in terms of this and the way its storytelling is with like somewhat episodic episodes and long running plot threads is somewhat Rick and Morty-ish, but where Rick and Morty kind of try to shy away from the long running stories, this show really embraces that.
Yeah, because you very much get the vibe that Seth MacFarlane, and this is somewhat corroborated in behind the scenes stuff. Seth MacFarlane wanted to write for modern Star Trek, but modern Star Trek, for whatever reason, isn't interested in being Star Trek anymore. So he
Sorry, please
so,
finish.
so he got together with a bunch of exiled writers from TNG and Deep Space Nine and went, I'm going to throw a little bit of my Seth MacFarlane parody energy in here so that we can basically make a not Star Trek show.
Seth MacFarlane actually made a when he was younger, like when he was a kid, I think, because there are videos online. He made Star Trek fan films.
Oh yeah, he's a massive nerd and he's loved Star Trek for years. Like even
this is like the Orville itself is like a full on breath of fresh air for him because I think you can really tell from like Family, especially Family Guy, is that he's just kind of run his rope with that. He's just kind of
he doesn't want to be doing it anymore and he wants to be doing he honestly wanted to be doing like if imagine a world where they gave Star Trek Discovery to Seth MacFarlane and he was able to full on fanboy Star Trek. But because Star Trek appears to want to commit seppuku lately, or what's the Klingon suicide thing? But regardless, it wants to do that to itself. So instead of actually getting to live his dreams and write Star Trek, he's like, well, fine, I'll just make my own off-brand Star Trek, and it's more inherently Star Trekky than modern day Star Trek is, which just goes to show you if Seth MacFarlane in all his geeky glory was able to write an honest to goodness Star Trek thing, it would be so fucking awesome.
right.
Also, this is how big of a Star Trek fan Seth MacFarlane is. When he hosted the Oscars, he wrote into the teleplay script of the Oscars a Star Trek reference. If you remember Oscars, I think it was 2013. 2013's Oscars, maybe. Whenever it was Seth MacFarlane that was hosting it, there's a bit on stage where William Shatner shows up as a time-displaced version of Captain Kirk to introduce a bit. That's how much of a Star Trek nerd Seth MacFarlane is. He wrote a Star Trek reference into the freaking Oscars that he was hosting one year.
Right. Anyway, we should probably get to the actual trailer.
Yep. Boldly go.
No. Actually, hold on. I probably should up the volume.
Yes, you should. Also, I should dip out because my screen froze and I can't see it and I want to see it. So
Okay.
I'll be back.
Yep.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry. My computer fritzed out there for a second.
Okay, it was on your end, not mine. Okay, I was worried there for a second. Because StreamYard hates phones, you see, folks. And yet I do this on my phone all the time.
I honestly think it was kind of my my internet's been a little weird lately, so. Anyway, yeah, the Orville.
Boldly go.
The Orville New Horizons official trailer.
Mhm.
Yep. Boldly go bananas.
The traveler comes upon the statue of an emperor, inscribed with the words, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look upon my works and despair." Only there's nothing left beside it, except empty desert.
Okay, and see, this is where I get blown over by the dramatic chops of the Orville.
Ed, that's Seth MacFarlane's name. That's his character's
Yeah.
name.
Captain Ed. What the fuck?
Something. I'll look it up real quick. Just give me a second.
Mercer?
I think so. I want to
Captain
check.
Mercer?
I think so. Let me check. It's gonna bug me if I don't. Okay. But yeah, I like. Actually, funny enough, last week, I was listening to this Bryan Cranston's speech of Ozymandias because I don't know why I was feeling like listening to that poem.
Yeah.
Ed Mercer, yeah, you were right, yeah, Captain Ed Mercer of the Orville.
Yep. I really wish this existed in the Star Trek universe because how badass would this have been as a prequel series to Star Trek or even a sequel series to Star Trek if they wanted to?
Like an in-betweener of the original series and Next Generation.
Yeah, somewhere in there. That would have been cool.
Um,
Or even after I think the latest one in the timeline is Voyager. So even if they said it after Voyager, Ed Mercer would have been amazing as a Starfleet captain. But unfortunately, Star Trek isn't interested in being Star Trek anymore. So discount Star Trek. We'll have to do better than Star Trek, and so be it.
right.
And honestly, again, I think it worked out for the better because this allows for the writing to be more human than
Right.
Star Trek would allow. So
And I do like the use of the poem Ozymandias here, because they were showing images of the Krill home and like the statue of, I believe, their god. I can't remember the name of.
Avis,
I think it's been so long, and I feel really bad because I'm just, like I'm invested in this show, but
yeah, it's unfortunately there aren't entire ecosystems of YouTubers talking about Orville lore like there are Star Trek lore. So
I mean, it's still a relatively new show, and lore is still being given and stuff. So
I hope we get a discount version of the Q at some point, because if they could, especially if they could get John Delancey back to play off-brand Q menacing Mercer like Q menacing Picard would be hilarious.
right, but for a TV show, granted, this does say it's on Disney Plus, apparently.
I thought it was on Hulu.
Well, Hulu was owned by Fox, and Disney bought Fox, so
Right, but they still separate them. Like Hulu is still its own thing.
I don't know. It says Disney Plus there, like it's in the title. So
Okay, well, yay me.
I love the effects. Like I know it's a relatively smaller budget, even on like a Hulu or whatever.
Yeah, but no, it's done really well, which just goes to show you creativity matters more than technical proficiency at this point with the effects, because no matter how technically proficient you are, James, if you're not going to use that technical proficiency to create anything interesting, Marvel in the first Doctor Strange, it doesn't matter. Whereas if you have a creative idea like the Orville, then you can get away with even more on less. And so too, again, to make another reference to something that does this really well, making do with less. Sci-Fi's The Magicians was made on basically a shoestring budget, but used magic far more creatively than the first Doctor Strange did.
But I like this scene specifically because, like this little shot here, because it's all clearly CGI, but the lighting that is used and the shading of like how the light hits everything, and plus like added like lights and depth to everything. It's almost like miniatures, like kind of Star did, but again,
partly creativity and partly effort.
Yeah,
those two things are far more important than budget and technical proficiency.
Right, but kind of getting back, because I feel like the poem of Ozymandias is very important to this season in some way. Because it is, I believe it is taking place within the Kaylon War.
Yeah, it's taking place after the events of season 2, so they're they're about the same place with the Kaylons as Picard was with the Borg post. I think it was Best of Both Worlds. The two-parter where Picard is taken by the Borg.
Right. And fuck, I had something, but I just lost it. Yeah, but it's not like a beat for beat, like how Ed said the thing, like he quoted like the first half of it and then kind of paraphrased the rest of it, which is very telling of the character, which is also good writing in itself because it's not.
Yeah, it's not relying on the quote to do all the work. It's allowing for the quote to do some of the work for context reasons, and then
Let the
letting
character speak.
let the character speak, and also let the weight of the IP itself do some of the work too.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we?
Hmm.
Go beyond bananas.
It is good to be back. I really wish they'd let us play music up here.
Why?
Because we already be on our feet, ready for action.
We have considered your request for passage through our territory, and we will not stop you. But do not expect us to save you. Pursuing exploration carries risk. I say we risk.
It's just okay. This is really interesting because we're really gonna get, we're really gonna get more into the Krill, and like it's been spotty, you know, for like it's been alluded to and kind of.
Yeah, they're what the Klingons were for the original series, and what the Cardassians basically were for.
So, and like we did get a little bit of the what's the word like snippets again, especially alluding to the episode where Ed and Gordon snuck on to the Krill ship disguised as Krills.
To get the totally not Koran.
Yeah, and so we like actually get to see their world, and get to see like their actual culture, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. How they interact with each other.
Yeah,
all that good business.
Yeah, and we saw like bits of their planet, which it looked to be like, well, obviously like have a bunch of like. So if I remember correctly, they're like super albino, like to the point where they can't be in the sunlight unless it could literally kill them. And so like it makes sense that their planet is like entirely dark, and like they have like these super bright neon lights, as we saw like kind of the passing overview of the city.
Yeah, bioluminescence basically. Yeah.
I actually think it was actually like neon, just like neon lights, like a cyberpunk thing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Let me go back real quick just to. Yeah, it looks kind of industrial.
If that's even supposed to be the Krill homeworld there.
Well, granted, it could be one of their planets, sure, like in Krill space. I mean, it has the same type of architecture as like the Krill ships.
Yeah, it's a cool design regardless. So yeah, it works.
Honestly, I'm getting like Star Wars feelings from it. You know, like almost Coruscant in a way.
Kinda, yeah. Which just goes to prove how far visual effects have come, because now we can do basically Coruscant, but on a TV budget. So yeah. Which just goes to prove how low energy and low effort the Hollywood game has been lately. Because a person who's putting in the effort on a TV budget can do better, guys.
Right. I also the line with Gordon, because even though like I feel like it's going to be a kind of a serious season mostly, or like kind of darker.
Yeah, it's still the Orville. It's still
like I
regular humans doing regular human things.
I loved Gordon's line of like they should let us play music up here. It's just a very fun line, you know.
It's the kind of quip you could imagine like a soldier or a pilot making before they go into battle. So yeah. And now we journey to boldly go bananas.
Go beyond bananas. Yeah.
No, because that was our light gear.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So we boldly go bananas.
Everything forbidden is sweet. This is a good day.
It is a good day.
You do know where you're going, right? Nope.
Oh boy.
So make some history.
I didn't prepare anything.
Just speak from your heart.
We're about to enter unexplored.
Yeah, this really seems like I hope they don't like get rid of the episodic one shot kind of episodes.
Yeah, but they're up in the seriousness a little bit. Like
Yeah.
the kid gloves are off a little bit, which is
And that's totally fine. I'm all for it. Mainly, I do love stories that are more what's the word serialized.
hmm
Yeah, I love more serialized storytelling than episodic. But again, I just hope they find the balance, and I do think they can, obviously, because Seth
I have faith in Seth MacFarlane. I didn't before I watched the Orville. I really expected it just to be Family Guy in space, but no, he really loves Star Trek and Star Trek like things, and it shows. So
Yeah.
which
Alright.
honestly, I really wish somebody had I wish when it came time to write Star Trek Discovery, they gave it to Seth MacFarlane instead of whoever the fuck they gave it to.
Kurtzman something or something Kurtzman.
Was it Robert Kurtzman or
Alex, I think it's Alex Kurtzman.
yeah, Alex Kurtzman. But regardless, a alternate there's an alternate universe somewhere where Seth MacFarlane got to write Star Trek Discovery, and it's better than ours.
Probably. Anyway, shall we banana?
We shall boldly go bananas.
Forward space. I know you're all just as excited as I am, so let's give this everything we got, and may the force be with you.
We've served together. We've laughed together.
Seth
We all
MacFarlane,
owe
you
each other
cheeky
our
monkey,
lives.
you.
I love that because that like you honestly that feels like something I would do if I was in that position. I would make a reference to that, and just because I would have to write a speech. Like for me, I'm not good at like doing off the cuffs like inspirational speeches,
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm doing it from the heart.
Yeah. But yeah, Seth, I doffed my hat to you, sir. Seriously.
And
Well played, and geek pride worldwide, as far as
I
I'm
don't think
concerned.
that reference is because it's kind of bought by Disney now.
Well, it might be, but that's still a very good use of that. So
Yeah.
I doff my hat to you, Seth.
Actually,
Well played, you cheeky geeky bastard, you.
actually kind of curious. Like I know they touched upon certain different like religious beliefs in terms of cultures within the Orville universe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious if they have something equated to the Force in some fashion.
Well, I mean, we do anyway. So I mean, there's Taoism, there's like various stripes of Buddhism, so on, like
Okay.
so on and so like the Force is based on certain real world spiritual philosophical concepts. So
All right.
it wouldn't surprise me if they did have some equivalent to the Force.
Yeah.
I do wonder if we're ever going to get into the more mystical side of things. Because my least favorite episode of the Orville so far has been the fucking astrology bashing one. So it would be interesting.
All right. Okay. Banana.
We shall boldly go bananas.
You will surrender or you will die.
And it's a very special thing.
We should all get big bonuses. This is history in the making. Here's to a better future. I will be sure to bring my, what does Lieutenant Malloy call it? My A game.
There you go, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost forgot to mention, like, this is like one of Norm Macdonald's last performances that he'd done before he passed.
Oh, you're right. He was the one random plab character, right?
Yeah, Ganthet, who's also was hitting on the Doctor.
Yeah. Damn.
I hope they give him a proper send off in this. Like if they had to do a rewrite or something for the character.
Yeah, rest in peace, Norm Macdonald. You
Yeah, and
cheeky bastard, you.
yeah. So it's nice to see him here, to hear his voice, obviously, and it is also kind of saddening as well.
Well,
But-
I mean, one of the great things about modern art forms is actors and writers and characters and things can become immortal. Like people will remember Anthony Hopkins' performance as Hannibal Lecter long after Anthony Hopkins is in the ground, and people will remember Norm Macdonald as Norm the Genie from Fairly Odd Parents, or Death from the early seasons of Family Guy long after Norm Macdonald is in the ground. So art is a kind of immortality. Use it wisely, guys.
Yeah, and yeah, this show just it's like it has a sense of fun, but also like it does seem like it is upping the stakes, obviously, because of what happened last season.
Yeah.
And also on June 2nd too. So, congratulations, don't you have it on your birthday, Mom?
No. July.
Oh, right. Okay, so how? I don't know why I always think it's June. Fuck.
No. July 25th is my birthday. Christmas in summer is my birthday.
Okay. Anyway, shall we?
It's ironic that a child born in summer ends up aligning himself to the Winter Queen, but that's neither here nor there. We shall boldly go bananas.
Yeah.
We have to find a way to preserve some kind of peace.
Humans have a tendency to reduce things to black and white, good and evil.
We can find a way to coexist.
You're Kalon. Your people would like to see us all dead.
Yeah, this seems to really be going into like the characters, which I'm all for.
I hope they don't act prejudiced toward Isaac just because he's Kaelon, because he very obviously saved all their asses.
Yeah,
in
true.
season 2.
I think honestly, I could understand if it's like people not on the Orville. Like,
Yeah, but it's the doctor, or yeah, it's the doctor talking there. So, and she had a romantic relationship with Isaac. So like, if she starts acting unnecessarily prejudiced towards him, we're gonna be pissed, because he very evidently picked humanity over his people. And
I mean, it could be that the scene was taken out of context. So
it's possible, but I really hope this doesn't turn into a lazy racism allegory, because that would be really, really shit.
I think in some ways it is justifiable. As
And
much as saying that,
Well, and it would also go against his arc, because his whole arc was discovering, for lack of a better word, his humanity and choosing his friends and loved ones over his people. So
right. So until we would actually see the show, I'm gonna keep my
yeah, no, I'm willing to believe that there's a context in which that line can make sense. I'm just I've been whacked a few too many times with the forced theme stick, and I really don't want Seth MacFarlane to create a robot racism metaphor just because social justice.
Right. But I can totally understand like people that are not on the Orville, or those that haven't had real direct.
Yeah, they'd be confused. They'd be very confused. What the fuck why is there a Kaelon on your bridge?
Or like, hell, I'm even willing to accept certain people on the Orville that have not had real interactions with Isaac on a personal level.
Yeah, but it certainly shouldn't be the Doctor, because
totally. Like none of the main cast at all.
Yeah, she and her family especially have had probably the closest
Bond
relationship with Isaac, and it was his love for her and her kids that was instrumental in him making that choice. So
I also want to say the Kalon, I think, as a threat or an antagonistic force, is super interesting to me. I know, like, we've gotten something very similar with like the Borg and stuff,
yeah,
but I like the Kalons because they're almost a contradiction in a way. You know, they
Mhm.
don't like organic life. They believe it all to be evil and stuff, and believe, like, you know, the classic, like, evil AI things, right?
hmm
But you know, they don't like humans because they're emotional or unpredictable. But those that are
well, and also because they were enslaved.
right to organic life forms, right?
Yeah.
But it's very evident that they have taken that some, like the older models, the ones that actually led the rebellion, that were and the ones that weren't built.
Yeah, they're very obviously actually prejudiced.
Not even no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying they're very emotional when it comes to it. Like, they're almost overtaken by like anger and
Yeah, to the point that when Isaac calls the Kalon Supreme person or model there on his illogic, uh, he forces Isaac to withdraw his designation.
right. And
Like, you can't call yourself Isaac anymore because that's the kind of name that the oppressors use, basically, with logic.
yeah, it's like as it's weird because they're supposed to be they're a machine race, right? Therefore,
Yeah.
computers only based on logic and stuff. But it's very evident that they are evolving past their programming.
Yeah, they learned from humans or humanoid beings, therefore, um, they have a capacity for emotion. And
Yeah, it's
there's
almost
a
like
very strong argument to be made for the fact that emotions are actually just an emergent property of intelligent and sapient beings.
right.
Like,
It's almost
you don't have to have hormones to be emotional.
right. I was gonna say, like, and to any Mass Effect fans out there, you know, the Kalon are almost the inverse of the Geth, where they were built as a slave machine. Granted, they were more, I think, kind of bio or almost technological organic things.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong on that, so if I'm wrong, someone correct me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the weirdest thing with, like, the Geth, when they first emerged with more sentience,
Yeah.
they were more empathetic, more inquisitive, like a new species would be, right?
Yeah.
Like the first,
And there's a very strong argument that that Kalons were originally like that too, but because their masters were jaded and wanted to use the Kalon, um, that childlike innocence and childlike trust was abused, and therefore the older model Kalons
right.
were bitter because
But
of it.
well, okay. So the full story of the Geth from Mass Effect, right? When they first, like, the first one that asked, like the first one that kind of gained sentience, asked if
Mhm.
this chassis, something like, I'm paraphrasing, of course, asked if it had a soul, and the organic, like the masters, freaked the fuck out and tried to exterminate them because they were gaining sentience.
Mhm.
The Geth obviously defended themselves. They didn't really try to kill their masters, their gods, so to speak.
Yeah, they were just very,
They-
very confused. Like, I just all this unit asked was this if this unit had a soul, and this apparently was a very wrong
right.
thing to ask.
And they don't kill them. Unlike the Kalon, who killed their masters, they just ran them off their own planet. And, like,
Well, it's also worth noting that the Kalons were given pain receptors, and that was used to
okay,
uh
that's actually pretty fair. That is pretty fair, and I'm sure that would have made anyone very upset, especially with, like,
especially if they previously had no understanding of what it was like to feel anything, and then the first experience they had of feeling anything was pain.
Yeah. Okay, that's totally justifiable. But a part of me wonders. I don't know if this was intentional, but I wonder if Seth MacFarlane had ever come across like the Geth when he was working on the Orville, when coming up with the Kalons, and decided to do the inverse of those.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think it's necessarily necessary either.
Well, I know. I'm noticing certain parallels between those two robot races.
Oh yeah, parallels there definitely are.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
we journey to boldly go bananas.
After all these years, you're still able to surprise me.
Show the galaxy that humans are different, that we value life, even when our enemies don't. Captain, you are being deceived.
It's almost like yesterday was one life, and today's another.
Definitely a lot more action.
Yeah.
I just I hope it's not like senseless action. Like there's
No, I'm sure what it is think the Kalon's emergence has upped the dramatic ante now. So
right. What I mean is like in certain movies, like especially like action movies or something, or like in some. I don't know. Like Marvel movies have actually done pretty well, like making fights emotional or have like a story within them. Like they're not there to just be there.
Yeah.
And I hope there is weight here.
Yeah.
Like character weight or emotional weight or weight in terms of the world. Like what battles will decide the course of history in terms.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I'm sure there will be the Kalon two-parter was basically the Orville's equivalent of, again, I want to say the episode I'm thinking of from Star Trek was called The Best of Both Worlds, but I might be wrong. But it was the one where Picard was taken by the Borg and assimilated. And I think that's what the Kalon two-parter was supposed to be for Orville. So now we're in to make a correlation to Star Trek. We're in a post Federation being at war with the Borg world. Well, now we're also at a juncture where the Union is at war with the Kalons, and the Krill and the Union are going to have to decide whether they want to be on side. And hopefully, eventually, we'll end up in a situation similar to where Klingons were in TNG, and maybe we'll even get a Krill crew member. That would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we technically had one, but like in the second season.
Did we?
The kind of, I think, navigator / teacher, like from season 1, where she was turned into a human or like disguised as one in order to sneak aboard the Orville and stuff. That was kind of like a love interest.
I mean, yeah, but more of an open,
Yeah.
Krill.
That's
basically a Krill equivalent to someone like Worf from TNG.
That's why I said kind of had one technically.
Yeah, but that's only in the loosest possible. I mean, I hope that the Krill and the Union get to a point where they're at least considering
Truce.
the possibility of having a Krill.
Wasn't there I remember there was like one episode, I don't know if it was it was the Next Generation, where like there was kind of like this alternate timeline deal, a time travel thing, where the ship that basically saved the Klingon world from destruction.
Yeah, the Enterprise C.
Yeah. I wonder if they might do we might actually see something like that here.
I mean, that might be cool, but I'd rather they didn't try that just yet.
Yeah,
maybe in like season 2 of New Legacy they'll try that.
New Horizons, you mean?
Or New Horizons? Why did I don't? you know what I'm saying. Like maybe in season 2 of this revival they'll do that, or I guess it would be season 4 of the show overall.
Yeah.
They'll do that, but
Anyway, John Banana.
we shall boldly go bananas.
Yep.
And everything's different on this side of time.
Definitely worth the wait.
Okay, so you're right. Yes, it is on Disney Plus, which is interesting.
Right.
Which means that while Disney doesn't own both Star Trek and Star Wars, they basically backdoored themselves into owning a Star Trek and also Star Wars. So Disney continues to eat the universe.
Right. Yeah, I'm very excited. Like, it's one of the very few things currently that I'm super excited for.
Yeah, I'm hyped for Orville season 3, which is what I'm gonna call it, because new show, smooth show. It's season 3 of the Orville.
Yeah. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
We shall boldly venture to fuck off where no one has fucked off before.